Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, my international friends, joining me as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news and all sorts of good stuff. And, of course, joining me today to talk about all that good stuff is one Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing, sir?
John, I don't have any hot toys coming in my future, and I think the rest of August and September look pretty bleak.
That sounds like there's a month coming up without the letter, Y in it. I mean, it just, of course there is. There's several of them. You don't have any hot toys on the way?
No.
That's a rare thing. Also, speaking about incredibly rare, wonderful things, we have actress Erin Cummings is here today. Erin, how you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Although Robert did walk in the door and immediately started challenging some of my ideas, so I feel like everybody better strap in. It's going to be an exciting show.
Okay, and we do have a lot of stuff that we need to talk about here today. We're going to be talking about, it's now official, Andy Serkis is indeed, it's all signed, sealed, delivered, it's done. He's directing Venom 2, so we've got that. Rumors going around about John David Washington. Should we even be paying attention to them? Where has the action star gone? That and a few things more. But before we get to all that kind of stuff, let's go off the top with this. I have personally, for those of you who've watched me for any period of time, been a cord cutter ever since I moved to Los Angeles. I moved to LA, never got cable. I just used, online streaming for all my entertainment, and I've been that way for almost 10 years, I suppose. And we've seen gradually more and more people adopting a cord cutter lifestyle, completely altering the entire systematic way that we have traditionally, as a people, consumed entertainment. You get a cable package, you get cable TV. That's the way you do it, and that's been changing. Well, it's been changing rather rapidly, as a brand new report has come out that's laying out that we are getting close in the next couple of years that there are going to be an equal amount of cord cutters to those people who actually pay for regular subscription TV. We're seeing the numbers have dropped. In 2014, there were over 100 million subscribers of cable television. The report now says within the next couple of years, that number will be sub 70 million, seeing a massive drop in more and more people adopting cable free. They're also said in the study, which I thought was rather interesting, the fact that even those people with cable television at home are year over year watching less television per day. So it's dropped like 5 or 6 or 7% over the last couple of years, the amount of average time the average American household watches television. Now, I'm sure part of that has to do with the rise of the influence of YouTube. Now you got a lot of teenagers, not so much teenagers, who watch almost as much YouTube, if not more YouTube, than they watch traditional television. Of course, you got video game industry is a huge thing as well. So there's a number of contributing factors to all that. This is what it said in Deadline, quoting the report. It says, by 2023, eMarketer projects the total number of paid TV subscribers will be 72.7 million, down from 100.5 million in 2014. The number of households without a cable, satellite, or telco pay subscription will be 56.1 million, up from just 22 million in 2014. Guys, we look at numbers like these. We see these massive sort of shifts, like from 2014 to what we see coming up for more than a double number of that. Rob, is this truly a reflection of the complete move to an a la carte internet streamer kind of mentality? Are the days of cable television truly numbered here?
Yes, it's just like physical media. I mean, what's happening is this is disruptive technology. We just saw those numbers. You're looking at a 25% drop in cable television subscribers, and you're looking at a 50% rise in people that have internet subscriptions or whatever they're doing. I mean, we're in the middle of a transition. It's not just how people are getting local television news. Without cable, how are people going to see local TV news? They're going to have to figure out a way. Independent film channels or TV channels like MeTV, where I can still watch classic Star Trek, whatever I want. What are we going to do? Of course, you can stream it as well. So why would I watch it on MeTV in standard def or whatever? I mean, the world is changing, and we're seeing rapid shifts. By 2030, there's people going to be like, "What was cable TV?"
Right.
Everything is moving over to the internet. That's just the way disruptive technology works, and unless people are ready for this, there's going to be a lot of people left in the dust and wondering why, what happened, because they're not paying any attention. Dude, physical media is going to be gone in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it is a changing landscape. One of the big things for me, because I was tempted a few times to go back and get a cable package, but then we saw these new streaming services emerge, things like Sling TV or YouTube TV, like I have now. Even Hulu now has live TV, where you can get 50 or 60 of the most popular channels anyway, as if you had a cable package, but now that was on streaming as well. So there is a shifting landscape. Aaron, when you look at this, and you're seeing these numbers dropping of people subscribing, probably coinciding with an increased amount of spam calls I get from my provider saying, would you like to get a cable television and internet bundle? No. For the 40th time, no. Like, are the days of this traditional method of television entertainment, are they numbered? And how do you see that affecting things?
Absolutely. It actually reminds me, I remember my senior year of college, and this is going to date me a little bit, but that's okay. My professor gave us all his cell phone number. And we said, well, okay, what's your home number? And he said, I don't have a home phone number. And we all looked at each other. We were college students. We were the cool ones. And he was the old professor. And he said, no, I just use my cell phone. And it was the most mind-boggling thing. What do you mean you don't have a home phone line? That's crazy. And now I don't know anyone with a home phone line. And so I feel like we're going to go the same direction with the ease and portability. If I can watch a show using on my telephone or on my laptop or my iPad when I'm going to visit my parents, and I don't have to worry about whether they have HBO or not. I can just watch it on my iPad because I have HBO Go. Then why would I bother paying money to keep a cable subscription at home when so much of us are always on the go? We're moving, we're traveling. A lot of people aren't home that much anymore anyway. So
the only downside to all of it is when, as our society becomes increasingly fragmented and we're going to suffer many, many societal disruptions over the next 20 years, people are going to be like, I wish I had a landline when our cell phone towers go out and all the internet falls away. Boy, wouldn't broadcast TV be good right now?
Well, that's what they tell you when you say, no, I don't want a home phone anymore. And they go, well, if there's an emergency and the cell towers go down, you're really going to want your home phone. Like, they actually kept me for a few years with that. I was like, what if an earthquake happens? Now I'm like, whatever. I'll go down with the rubble. I'm not trying to be a hero.
One of the immediate consequences we're seeing now, too, is that it's a death spiral for cable, because it's a domino effect that starts happening. They have fewer subscribers, which means they have less income. The cost of production is going up. So what do? Well, we need to raise the prices for the consumers we still have. Only more incentivizing them to get away from cable because they raise their prices, which in turn gives them less revenue, which means in turn they raise the prices. And again, like I said, it was kind of a joke, but it's true. At least once a month, I get reached out to by my internet service provider, which is also a cable provider and is also a home phone provider. And they're saying, wouldn't you like to save with a bundle package of a home phone? I'm like, stop right there. I haven't had a home phone since 2006. So I just don't know. But it is this death spiral, and you see it happening when their solution for the problem exasperates the problem, which makes them exasperate their so-called solution, which furthers the problem, and they're in that death spiral that I don't think they're going to get out of at this point. But the question is, what do you guys think about all that? Do some of you guys still use a home cable? According to the numbers, the majority of people still do. Do you see it lasting much longer? Can you see a good argument for keeping it around? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. One more thing off the top before we get to our main topics. And I'd really rather not talk about this, but it does directly affect the movies we're watching right now. And I have had a ton of you guys this morning writing to me about it, so I figured we better address it. You guys will know that there has been brewing and simmering and outright explosive drama going on around the Fast and the Furious franchise, particularly around Tyrese Gibson, who has been publicly attacking Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for a while now because he was doing Hobbs and Shaw. Everybody knows there's been a breakdown in the relationship between Vin Diesel and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. For the most part, those guys keep it offline, though. They don't talk about it publicly per se, hardly at all. But Tyrese Gibson has been just openly, completely, viciously attacking Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, particularly when a Hobbs and Shaw movie got announced and maybe pushed back Fast and the Furious. What is it? They're going into 9 or 10? 9. Push back Fast and Furious 9 and all this kind of stuff. Then later, it got ridiculously embarrassing. Then later he revealed, no, I'm just stressed because something to do with custody battle of his kids or something like that and whatever. Well, guess what? Tyrese Gibson is at it again. When the light of Hobbs and Shaw opening to $60 million, which makes it one of the biggest openings of the year, and one of the biggest openings of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's career outside of the Fast and the Furious and all that kind of stuff, still took number one spot at the box office, $180 million worldwide. Tyrese Gibson decided to go online again and slam Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and the studio for this little move of theirs. He went out there, decided to attack them, made fun of the fact that it only made $60 million, all that kind of stuff, and then very, passive-aggressively, sarcastically going, but hey, give credit to Dwayne Johnson. He tried. He tried his best. He tried his best. All right. Look, I'm not going to mince any words here. Last year, when all this nonsense was going on with Tyrese Gibson, I said this, and I firmly stood by it. If you're the studio, you've got to get him the fuck out of your franchise. Get him as far away from your franchise as possible, because this guy is cancerous to your franchise. He is a small collection of seemingly insignificant cells that provides no benefit to the growing health of the organism and is actually internally really destructive to the organism that's in and could eventually lead to its demise if not addressed. That's what this guy is within the context of this franchise. And I said at the time, this is not going to stop. This guy has clearly shown that he has a stability issue. And with all the stuff he's saying now, I don't care if he's apologized at this point. I said, this is not going to stop. It will flare up again. He's going to embarrass the franchise. He's going to embarrass the studio. And he's just going to cause internal damage. That's all he's going to do, is cause internal damage at this point. Separate him from this franchise now. They didn't. They kept him on. And all we could go is, well, then God bless. Let's hope it works out. But now it's back at it again. He's back at it again. So right now you're a studio executive looking at this and you're thinking, we've got this movie Hobbs and Shaw out in theaters. We're making some money with it. It didn't have as big as an opening as we want. And what do we've got? We've got one of the stars of one of our other movies out here publicly attacking that movie that we're trying to make money on right now. And he's doing this. You know what they do in sports? They call it a destructive locker room, right? When you got somebody in the locker room on your team that is just a disruptive force to your team and is a distraction to your team and takes away from what your team goals are, it doesn't matter how good that player is. You take a scalpel, you cut him out, and you throw that player out. Now, maybe they'll do better in another environment, and hopefully they will. But for your team, it's the wrong mix. This guy, by the way, Tyrese Gibson, I just want to remind you, you are a fucking nobody. Okay? And that is coming from somebody who is a bigger nobody than you, and it takes a nobody to recognize a nobody. And brother, you're part of the fraternity. You are a nobody. You know what you've done? If you're going to get on here and run your mouth, you know what you've done for the past 7 years outside of Fast and the Furious? Nothing. You've done nothing in the last 7 years outside of Fast and the Furious. You had Black Nativity, okay. You did a voice spot once on American Dad. Hoorah. You had a small role in Ride Along. Great. For the last 7 years, nobody's wanted to work with you. And you take it upon yourself to come out and damage the studio's property, attack fellow actors and all this kind of stuff, while you are nothing but a coattail riding wannabe. And you're taking it upon yourself to do this. I don't care how far along you are into the filming of Fast 9. If I'm an exec at Universal right now, I get rid of this guy. I get rid of him. You know why? Not just for the sake of Hobbs and Shaw, not just for the sake of the future of my franchise, but because I've got other people in these movies, like a Vin Diesel, like a Ludacris, like a Michelle Rodriguez, who are just busting their asses trying to do what's best for the team and make things work without being destructive behind the scenes like a Tyrese Gibson. And when you look at people like this in incredible positions of privilege, especially when it's somebody who's just riding the coattails of Fast and Furious success and has no career of his own to speak of outside of it, coming out and damaging the property and damaging the brand, it's frustrating as hell as a fan. As a fan, it's frustrating as hell. Shut your mouth! It's just unbelievable. And it's frustrating to me to see this kind of bullshit. Anyway, Rob, you got any thoughts on this?
I choose to believe that he's just method. That he hones the character of Roman in real life. and it sort of helps him with his process. It's what he's doing. No, to be honest, I like his character in the Fast franchise, but I find this kind of behavior destructive. If you're being paid to do a job, you're being paid to do a job both, I think, publicly, out in the press. That's part of what you do as an actor. They pay you for publicity as well. And what he's doing, I understand there's a lot of resentment. If you were in a franchise, and he was in the franchise since Too Fast, Too Furious, the second film in the franchise, and you watch these two ne'er-do-wells who come in late, Johnny-come-latelys, get to make a movie in Hobbs and Shaw, there's probably a lot of resentment there. But on the other hand, Jason Statham and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson have a long, profitable history in the movie business. And it ain't show friends, John. It's show business. That's what I always say. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And those are rules to live by, and he's not doing that. I think that these kinds of public feuds, when you're not out there supporting your team, and let's face it, it does say Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. You're all part of the same team. A win for one team is a win for the whole team. And I think it's bad form.
And I think somebody needs to remind this guy that the Fast and Furious was a middling franchise at best until Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson came around in Fast and Furious 5, and that's when the box office started to take off. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that a Tyrese Gibson or anybody should walk around and kiss Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's ass, by no stretch of the imagination. But I'm just thinking, if I'm a studio exec, and watching a star in one of my movies attacking one of the stars of one of my other movies and deliberately trying to undermine my project, it's like, oh, I'm paying you money? Not anymore, I'm not. Get off my lot. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting to it a little bit.
What I was going to say, there's a minor league baseball movie that was made in the early 90s called Pastime. And it's about an over-the-hill pitcher. And the coach in the movie tells this over-the-hill pitcher something that I've applied to all aspects of my life. And the coach says, it doesn't matter how good somebody else is. It doesn't make you any better or any worse. And I think Tyrese Gibson should do well to heed those words. How well Hobbs and Shaw is doing doesn't affect him, but it might affect his franchise, which then could affect him.
So, Aaron, look, I mean, at the risk of putting you on the spot, because you're in a precarious position, you are an actress, you are in the business, and I'm sure I'm saying you've seen things like this before. But anyway, what's your initial response and reactions and thoughts on this?
Well, my initial response is, well, first of all, I'm still clutching my pearls over over all the things that you said. I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't seen John Campea like that in a long time. There's not much more that I can add to this, but I do think that there is a certain responsibility that you have when you are a public figure. It's really easy. We get heated and, we go on Twitter, but it's one thing to attack a situation. I know a lot of people over this weekend, because of the shootings that happened, have gone out on Twitter and Instagram and whatever, and they're mad about things that are happening politically. But when you're like you've already said, when you're attacking people that you work with, and you're taking personal feuds that may be happening on set, and you're broadcasting them, you're then inviting everyone else to have a commentary about it, and you're putting yourself in a position for everyone to start taking arrows at you. So I just think that it's best, like, there's plenty of actors that I've worked with, and and I've talked to both of you about certain actors that I no longer wish to work with, and directors and things like that, but you just don't say those things publicly. There's a professionalism about it, and the fact that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Vin Diesel have had issues between the two of them that they've never spoken publicly about it. That's what a star does. That's what someone who is a professional does. And yeah, I think that Tyrese really is only showing that he doesn't have that. He's not clearly a professional. Otherwise, he would know that Twitter is not the place to air that kind of those kind of opinions. Yeah, and the additional unfortunate thing here too is, I mean, who's going to want to work with him moving forward? Knowing that anything that goes on, like whether you're a producer or a fellow actor or whatever, if anything goes on, this guy's going to start broadcasting. Yeah, that he takes to Twitter. Yeah, he's going to take it to social media and start running out. And it's very dangerous. This again goes back to something, Rob, that you and I have talked about before. The moment I am like
I get out of being 10th level nobody and maybe up to like 5th level nobody, I am hiring a social media person, because I don't think any famous athlete, actor, whatever, who's so in the public eye like that, I think everybody, I've said this before, should have somebody that if I want to send a tweet, I write up a tweet and I hit send, it actually gets held until my social media manager can see it, because they have no bias, they have a fresh set of eyes, and say, hey, actually, before we put this public, boss, this could come across like this, and have somebody to actually act a little bit as that filter between the brain and the mouth, because sometimes, like me, that filter doesn't work, right? And you're not thinking about the grander picture, and you put up something that you instantly regret. And I just think if you're rich enough, hire some university kid part-time to just take a look at your social media posts before you post them. Protect yourself, protect your properties, protect everybody else around you, and maybe protect your future, because at this point, I just don't know who's going to want to work with this guy.
The drafts folder is a really good thing.
The drafts folder is a great thing.
I have definitely, because that's what I do is Tom now, because I've posted some things that I've later had to pull down, nothing as egregious as that, and I don't have the same following, so it doesn't matter. But Tom is usually a really good person to go, why don't you sleep on that? And then the next morning he's like, yeah, you don't need to post that.
I'm enjoying your Twitter feed.
Mine?
Yeah.
Oh, well, mine is very ranty right now, but yeah.
All right, guys. Question is, what
Thank
do you make of this whole situation? You just want it to go away like me? Or any other thoughts you might have, jump down in the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With that down and out of the way, let's now move on to our main topics today. How do we select our main topics here in the John Campea Show? Well, it's really rather simple. See, you guys come up with them by going to www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact. Once you get there, you're going to see a form. Fill that form out with your topic or question, hit submit, and then maybe, just maybe, you might see your topic or question featured here on the John Campea Show as well. With that down, let's now move on to our first main topic today. Speaking of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, our first main topic today comes to us from Randy Marshall, who writes, Hobbs and Shaw isn't the best movie of the year or anything, but I liked it a lot. One of the things that I noticed was that we were seeing two of the last of a dying breed in Hollywood, the legit action star. Johnson and Statham are the last of them. I guess you could say Vin Diesel and maybe Keanu Reeves, but gone are the glory days of Arnold, Sly, Van Damme, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Wesley Snipes, Mel Gibson, Bruce Willis, and Harrison Ford. Where has the action star gone? And do you think there are many more left of them? All right, thanks a lot for the question. And you know what's funny, Randy? This question about where is the true through and through just pure action star anymore? That was a conversation me and a couple of friends of mine had about 6 or 7 years ago. And it was about these same two guys. We were asking, like, maybe it's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and maybe it's Jason Statham. And that was 7 years ago. And here we are now talking about a 47-year-old Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and a 51-year-old Jason Statham as being last of the dying breed. I mean, I suppose you could also say a Tom Cruise. But he's not just a pure action star. He's a great actor who also does a lot of action. I don't know. It's weird to think about in those terms. But it does really feel like the days, like back in the 80s, and that huge, great list you put together of all these action stars that we used to know and love and become instantly recognizable back in the day when just putting that action star's name on a movie meant people were going to go to the theater. It's a different day now. The only thing that I can think about, Rob, when I think about the idea that, why don't we have that pure action star anymore like we did in the 80s? The first thing that pops to my mind, and this is really the only explanation I can come up with, and I'm really curious to know your guys' thoughts, but is this. Is back in the 80s, it was cool if you had a Van Damme. And I love me for some Jean-Claude Van Damme, but he can't act. I mean, he's not an actor. He's not a thespian. You had guys like Jackie Chan, who is so wonderfully entertaining, but he's not about to do Hamlet. You had guys on and on. You had a long list of these guys. Arnold, maybe the greatest, most iconic of the action stars of all time, maybe. Never been the strongest thespian in the world. That was an era when that was okay. I feel like today, guys, that the audience wants a little bit more. They're looking for actors who can do action star stuff. Jason Statham has been great even in his non-action roles. Like if you go back to Snatch and stuff like that, he's just an incredibly great, fun presence to watch on screen. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, while I would say at this point is never going to get an Academy Award nomination for acting, he has turned into a legitimately serviceable actor for a lot of the stuff that he's in. But it just seems like we're not getting that anymore. You can't just have today some guy like a Chuck Norris who's not a great actor but can do all the great. It just feels like that day's gone. So when I think about why aren't they here anymore, I think it's because you can't just be an action star anymore. But I don't know. That's my thought. Rob, what do you think?
Well, I think ultimately our culture has changed. The idea of these beefy action guys that'll commit acts of violence and beat down people and then deliver some witty bon mot are over. I mean, we live in a time where, well, it's toxic masculinity day, John. I mean, we can't have these guys doing what they used to do. I mean, people are like, violence doesn't solve anything. I mean, really, this isn't the way we should treat
you're talking
people.
about the comic book action genre with the Hulk smashing are the biggest films in history right now. So I don't know how far you can say that.
These are people who are righteous. These are people who have they're saving humanity. These are people. Remember, our favorite action stars were the lone wolves. These were guys that worked alone, and they were brooding, and they were quick to incite violence and kill people just intermittently or all the time. I mean,
it was for heroic cause.
It was. I don't know, man.
Really? Rambo was always the hero.
I think
Arnold was always the hero.
We grew up with these guys that we love them. We love them. I love Lee Marvin. I love Steve McQueen. I love the manly men. You know, I loved it in Goldfinger at the beginning when James Bond is infiltrating that drug den, and when he sees that he's going to be clocked in the back of the head by a thug, he does not hesitate to throw the woman he's making out with in front of that guy to accept the blow instead of him, and she gets knocked down on the floor. You can't do that anymore. We just don't live in that world, and it's sad. I think it's a sad time. You know, we need to bring the action star. See, thank God. But is it? I mean, right now, what happens if we need a John Rambo? What happens if our society needs one?
You're not describing a hero. You're describing a dick.
Yeah.
Like,
dude, our action stars...
A guy who throws his girlfriend in front of him to take a blow, that's not a hero.
That was never cool. And like,
that's not cool. It's never been cool.
Listen to what you guys are saying. No, I'm not saying it was cool or not. What I'm saying is our society has changed with this kind of violence, and this kind of hero does not exist
I don't
anymore.
know. Again, I draw your attention to Thor. Thor has a body count that would put John J. Rambo's to shame. Thor is a guy who would throw his cup across the thing and say, another. You know,
Thor is a fantasy character that's from Asgard.
Guess what? Rambo's a fantasy character.
Yeah, but Rambo lives in the real world.
Yeah, but a fantasy character nonetheless. You know, where you look at all the classic Arnold movies. He's when he's not a world-ending robot.
But these guys dispatch. I mean, they literally, if they need to shoot someone in the head. I mean, you look at John Wick. How many? He's like one of the last. He shoots dudes in the head all day long.
You know how many people Iron Man killed? Just go back and watch
Punisher and Iron Man.
Watch how many people he kills.
Superheroes out of it, though. You can't.
Why?
I think you're drawing a false narrative here because you mentioned yourself the other action series, John Wick. Massive body counts, right? We look at that action franchise. You're looking at guys like James Bond, who today continue to have a license to kill. You're talking about the superhero genre is superheroes, yes, but it's still the action genre today that has lots of action.
But we're talking about, you said
counts.
The action hero.
Right, yes.
And the iconic action hero is very specific. And the action that these characters took is very specific. And we don't live in a world, there's a reason why we're not seeing those kinds of characters anymore. And I don't think superheroes are the same thing as, say, the John Rambos or even Mel Gibson, like when he's playing Martin Riggs in the Lethal Weapon movies. It's a different world. We've got a whole... Now, fantasy characters, superheroic characters, are more palatable than people who are action heroes in, say, the real world. We don't have the vigilante justice of the Charles Bronsons or the exterminators. The Punisher, again, is a fantasy.
real
Okay,
human
Brad
being,
Pitt
a
in
real
Once Upon a
human
Time
being.
in Hollywood. Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And this is a guy, and as a woman, I'm saying this, who literally takes a woman's head and beats it until it goes into a bloody pulp. Granted, she deserved it. But that's the thing. This guy, he's doing action. He's got these great action scenes with, supposedly
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. I think that is the problem that I'm having with what you're saying is that you're equating toxic masculinity to manly men. And that's very different.
No.
A manly man, I'm all for. I want to watch a manly man beat the crap out of somebody. I want to watch a good fight scene. I want to see somebody go in and, save the day. And if a woman's got to take a hit because she's a bad guy, then she needs to take a hit too. I get that. I have no problem with that. Lexi Alexander, who directed Punisher Warzone, got a lot of heat for having, violence against women in her movie, but she was like, that's the reality of this. So I don't think that it's that we're not allowed to do those things anymore. I think that it's more that actors want to have a variety of things in their repertoire. And you're right, John. The guys that are coming up and the women that are coming up that want to do action, they can also do Shakespeare. They're doing Shakespeare in the Park, and then they're going to go and do, a superhero movie. But also, hello, Linda Hamilton. I mean, have we seen the trailers for the new Terminator coming out? She is an action hero. And the second she steps out of that Jeep, I'm like, there she is. That's an iconic action hero. And that's what I know her for. Angelina Jolie. I'm excited that she's going to be coming up in this new film.
Maleficent?
Right,
Or Eternals.
Eternals.
The Eternals. Yeah.
I have to say, though, that what we're talking about, I think, is two different things. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, set in 1969, the time is different. And it's part of that whole premise of that movie is it's looking at characters. There's a reason why Brad Pitt's character is that way, because he doesn't exist anymore. That's why he's portrayed the way he's portrayed. Those characters are gone.
But he's
as a
portrayed right
noble,
now.
good, honorable guy.
Is he? That might have killed his wife?
They never say he killed his wife.
Well, no, they don't.
No, they say that he did, but they never prove that he
but the
did.
movie
It's
doesn't show
alluded
us
to
the
it.
audience.
But remember,
Yeah.
this movie is called, it's also a fairy tale. And the way it's all being portrayed is the whole movie is about
But
how...
so is Commando. Commando was a fairy tale.
Right, but let me ask you, the question is, why? The question that was asked is, why don't we have these characters anymore?
These actors anymore. Dwayne Johnson is the action star. Why don't we have the action stars anymore that are just purely known, like back in the day when Bruce Willis at a time was just seen as the action star, when Jean-Claude Van Damme is the action star. Why don't these guys exist anymore?
I mean, Bruce Willis was also on Moonlighting. He was also a deaf comedian.
Oh, that's why Bruce wasn't the best example. But you got Jackie Chan's.
I wouldn't have put Bruce Willis in that category with the rest of them.
But they all, aside from I would say Van Damme and Arnold, Sylvester Stallone beginning in the Rocky franchise, and I guess you could say Rocky was action, but I mean these iconic action stars. Why? The question is, why don't we have them, and why don't we have those characters anymore either? And I think it really is because our society shifted.
But here's why you're wrong, Rob. Here's why you're wrong. It's because a lot of these characters you're referring to were good, noble characters. I go back to the movie I just mentioned, Commando. Like he was a noble, honorable guy doing noble, honorable things in Commando. When you look at things like Predator, again, we're sticking with Arnold here. He was a good guy doing good things, trying to, first of all, save his own team and take down this thing that's hunting and killing villagers in the jungle. I think you're confusing this notion that the true action star was always the true action character were always submoral dicks, and I just don't think historically that's true at all.
No, not at all. It was how. Look, even the John Wick franchise takes place in this heightened world where there's a fantasy context to this assassins. There's assassins everywhere. New York is run by Larry Fishburne and his team of homeless people. When we're dealing with the action stars of yore, there was a way that they used violence in those films. There was a way they used those characterizations that we have moved away from. And I think it is a cultural shift that we've seen. And that's why those characters in those movies aren't. I mean, look, when they bring back the Expendables, they do it as a throwback to a time that is no longer here.
Yeah, which is a lot more tame than some of the other action films we have today.
Right, but again, it's the context that we're being presented.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you, Rob. I think you're painting a false narrative. I think you're seeing things. I mean, from my perspective, at any rate, I feel like you're painting a reality that just simply doesn't exist. I feel like you're saying there's this distinction when really there is none. The closest thing I can come up with a modern gist of this is maybe a Jason Momoa. I think a Jason Momoa who is kind of goes back to that whole Van Damme, Jackie Chan. I'm trying to remember the name of the other guy that I can't remember now. Anyway, where look, Momoa's not the strongest thespian in the world. I think he's serviceable, but everybody's always going to look at Momoa as an action guy, right? And he can come in and he can be Khal Drogo, right? He can be in Game of Thrones and be that guy, although he was never really portrayed as a hero in that, although he became the love interest. Then he can become Aquaman and things like that. He can do Bullet to the Head, which I actually got kind of a kick out of Bullet to the Head. I like that one. But I don't know. I think this distinction you're making, I'm not seeing it between the way the action heroes used to do things and the way the action heroes do things now. To me, the action heroes today are far more violent, far more visceral, far more gratuitous than they were back then. And I'm not seeing
we also have changes. I mean, look at the spaghetti westerns. You know, one could say, why don't we have any manly men like we had in the spaghetti westerns? Every decade it changes and things ebb and flow.
That was my point.
But I don't think that's because of toxic masculinity or because you can't hit a woman.
That's only one element of it. It's only one.
Well, I don't think that is an element of it.
Look, you don't see the Charles Bronson, the rape revenge films we had of the 70s, you know, where you watch a Death Wish. I mean, look at the modern Death Wish compared to the Death Wish of the 70s.
Because it was a crappy film.
No, but I mean, but
for those you still get, you know, Last House on the
left. Those are really good examples.
But
of
you
the
get those
differences.
today. I mean, you get those today, and they can be harsh and brutal and whatever. And I don't know. But listen, we've got to move on from this topic here. The question though is, we'll throw it over to you guys. What do you think about that? Is there, first of all, do you even see a difference between the action heroes of today and the action heroes of another era? Like the person who asked the question, do you see is there only being a last few left of the true breed of action heroes? If so, why do you think that? Do you think more along the lines of me or along the lines of Rob or Aaron? What are your guys' opinions on that? Jump down in the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, with that down, let's move on to main topic number 2. And our second main topic today comes to us from Gary Travaris, who writes, "Hey, John, I'm a fellow Ben Affleck fan and have enjoyed most of his work. Just saw today that his new movie, The Way Back, from this October to March 2020. I can't help but wonder if maybe they moved it back to give more time for the public to feel less awkward about seeing Ben Affleck, who has struggled so publicly with addiction, in a movie playing somebody struggling with addiction. Or do you think there could be another reason? Thanks." All right, so for those of you not sure what Gary is talking about, Ben Affleck has a new movie coming out called The Way Back, where he plays a dude struggling with addiction. As he pointed out in the message, Ben is a guy who is very publicly struggled with addiction, and we've seen a lot thereof. And some people that I talked to felt a little weird about hearing about his upcoming movie. Here's a description of it. This comes from Variety. "Warner Brothers has moved back Ben Affleck's addiction drama, The Way Back, from October 18th to March 6th. The film, which has been known previously as The Has-Been and Torrance, is directed by Gavin O'Connor. And by the way, Gavin O'Connor directed him in The Accountant, which I freaking love. And stars Affleck as a former basketball player who struggles with addiction that has led to the loss of his wife and family. As a part of his recovery, he becomes the coach of the high school basketball team of his alma mater." All right, so the question comes out is, do we think, moving it from October, so November, December, January, February, March, 5 months, moving it almost half a year. The question is, do we feel and think that maybe they moved this back that half a year to give a little bit more buffer between the events of Ben Affleck, trying to deal with his addiction issues and stuff like that, to when it comes out, so hopefully that the audience will feel less awkward about it? I'll say this. I could see why that thought would come to mind. I do. I can see why that thought would come to mind. But to be honest with you, I think if that was part of the consideration, they probably just wouldn't have made this movie with him in the first place. I mean, that's how it strikes me at him, right? It just sort of feels like if that was something they were worried about, then you don't go with a Ben Affleck to make the movie in the first place. So clearly that's something they're already comfortable with. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, Rob, and I'm going to guess that this was just simply a scheduling move. Maybe just thought that date would be a more friendly date for something like this. I don't see there being much more to it, but I can understand why the question would come up. You're seeing this situation, Rob. What do you attribute it to?
Well, it's funny. I actually read an article about this very thing yesterday. One, they're very bullish on the movie. They think the movie's really good. And October, there's no basketball season. So they're moving this to basketball season.
That's a good observation.
March, you've got the Final Four happening. You've got the NBA season is in full swing by then. And they really wanted to make that part of the conversation because they were even talking about this film as an awards contender. So at least, look, again, you always have to read articles about movies with a grain of salt. But I was reading this going, because there was no mention of addiction or anything, but that this film was not necessarily on the radar as much. And then they saw it, and apparently people are like, wow, this is really good. We want to give it a chance to be part of that conversation.
Aaron, you're seeing this. I mean, at first, as an audience, remember, I'm a Ben Affleck fan. I've been one of his bigger supporters.
Me too.
And of course, hearing that, after seeing Ben in the news and then hearing he's going to be playing it, obviously there's a bit of a question like that. Do you think there's any connection between the bumping of the dates and his real life issues? Or do you think this is really just coincidental about something else?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with it whatsoever. Because his real life issues were his real life issues before he signed on for the film. As you said, if that was a concern, they wouldn't have done the film with him in the first place. And keeping it to the original release date or pushing it 5 months is not going to change the fact that he has this history with addiction issues.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it makes it more relevant. Similarly to Michael Keaton doing Birdman, which obviously had some, in some people's minds had some connection to him playing the original Batman. I see this, from what I read, I think that Rob's observation about basketball season is spot on and very smart. But in addition to that, it was originally being released the same weekend as Maleficent and Zombieland 2, which the studio, I think, maybe was concerned about that. So pushing it doesn't have as much box office competition. So I think it's a smart move and a strategic move, but not having anything to do with his history.
The question is, what do you guys make of this? Do you think there might be, the studio trying to put a little buffer there? Do you feel like we do? It's like, no, that probably actually doesn't have anything to do with it. What do you think about that whole thing? Jump down in the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, with that down, let's move on to the third main topic today. And our third main topic today comes to us from our Patreon supporter, Dion Shepard. And first of all, thanks for being a Patreon supporter, Dion. Hey, John and crew. So it looks like Tom Hardy's Andy Serkis post was no error. I'm reading that it is now confirmed that Serkis will indeed direct Venom 2. I know you mentioned that you would be happy with either of the three potential directors helming, but now with Caesar himself getting the job, what do you all think he can bring to it? Even more, what would you like to see him do with it? Thanks, and bring on the filthy. All right, thanks a lot for that, Dion. And yes, for those of you who, we've been talking for this past week or so about how, reports came out that Andy Serkis, along with Travis Knight and Rupert Wyatt, were the front runners to become director of Venom 2. Then the other day we had to talk about it again because Tom Hardy put up a picture of Andy Serkis on his social media and then quickly took it down. I was like, well, I guess that solves that mystery. But now there's no more wondering. It's official. Whereas Andy Serkis himself took to Instagram and put up this picture of him holding up the Lethal Protector comic. And it says, it's actually happening. I can feel it. The symbiote has found a host in me, and I'm ready for the ride. Can't wait. Are you ready, Tom Hardy? So it's a done deal now. It's finished. Andy Serkis is now going to be the director of Venom 2. And I'm putting up this picture for no other reason that now I can say, here's a picture with me and Venom 2 director Andy Serkis. I just wanted to be able to say that. With Venom 2 director Andy Serkis. Rob, I said before, when the possibility of Andy Serkis directing this first came up, I said, I'm very bullish on this. I like this idea. I mean, there are other directors you can get to that I would be perfectly happy with, but this is one I'd be particularly happy with. Working with Peter Jackson on the Lord of the Rings films. Peter Jackson then made him his second unit director for the Hobbit films. I thought he did a great job with Andrew Garfield in Breathe. I thought it was a very ambitious undertaking what he did with the Mowgli movie. I didn't end up really loving that Mowgli movie he did, but it was an incredibly ambitious thing. And you're talking about now, looking at the specific strengths that somebody brings to the table, you're talking about a very motion capture CG lead character in Venom with maybe the greatest motion capture actor the world has ever seen, who has already shown he's got good sensibilities and director's chops. He's a huge fan of the genre at the same time. Could there have been better choices? Like, would I have taken Christopher Nolan to direct Venom 2 over Andy Serkis? Sure. Are there maybe some other directors that would have been my first choices? Sure. But when I look at the specific tool belt that a guy like Andy Serkis brings, with his experience, with his resume, with his, let's say, the multifaceted tools he's got in his belt, being a motion capture performer himself and all that kind of stuff, I'm very happy about this. I think this is going to be a good fit. I think he's going to bring something very visceral to this. You know, when you look at what he did with Caesar in his Planet of the Apes movies, like, he just has this understanding about how to give all the team the best motion capture possible. He worked with, why am I forgetting the name of the actor who played Banner in Mark Ruffalo. You know, Mark Ruffalo talks about how he, you know, Andy Serkis worked with him a bit, gave him just, I mean, I just think there's a lot of upside to this. So I'm excited to hear about this. I think he's going to do a great job. And granted, I am a big fan of the original film. I like the first Venom a lot. Rob, now that it is finally official and we can take the speculation part out of it, how do you feel about the choice of Andy Serkis directing him? And what things do you think that he can bring? And what do you think maybe might have been some of the elements that might have put him over the top here?
Well, I think what you said was absolutely 100% right. I think the best thing that Andy Serkis brings to the whole idea of motion capture is the fact that, one, he's an incredible actor, and he's going to be working with an incredible actor in Tom Hardy, who's one of the most, I think, exciting actors we have today. And Venom, the movie Venom, is about that character. You know, it's about Eddie Brock, and what Andy Serkis does better than anyone in the business is take motion capture and the craft of acting and fuse them together. Gollum was groundbreaking. When we saw what he did with Gollum, it was amazing. And then he carried it to a whole nother level with Caesar. I mean, all three of those Planet of the Apes movies were astonishing. And I think an actor like Tom Hardy, who you want to use that guy, you want him to be unleashed as a performer, and you don't want him buried under, well, I mean, the Venom character is pretty all-consuming. And I really do think Andy Serkis and Tom Hardy working together are going to take Venom to the next level. Whatever more they could do with that character, that combination, I think, can't be beat. And I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the character of Venom.
It's going to be interesting. Aaron, you're hearing about this. I mean, look, the most important decision a movie ever makes is putting the director in that particular chair. What do you think about this match of Andy Serkis and Venom 2?
I'm thrilled about it. The best directors that I've ever worked with, the best casting directors that I've worked with, all have some sort of acting background. And I'm not saying those are the best directors, period, because there's a lot of components to what makes a director a really strong director. But as an actor, the experience that I have on set working one-on-one with a director, if someone has an acting background, I can tell immediately, and it's just an exciting opportunity. It's an exciting experience because they know how to bring things out of an actor that a director who's more of a technical director may not necessarily know how to do. And so I think that Andy Serkis working with Tom Hardy is just going to be incredible. I'm excited about it.
Well, guys, now that the speculation is over and we know exactly who's going to be directing this film, how do you feel about the choice of Andy Serkis directing Venom 2? Yeah, there may have been a couple of other directors you may have chosen in front of him, but now that we've got him, how do you feel about this? Do you think this is going to be a good fit? Are you worried about it? Jump down to the comment section below and let me know what you think. All right, with that down, let's move on to our fourth main topic today. And our fourth main topic today gets submitted to us from Steve Calderon, who writes, what are your thoughts on John David Washington rumored to appear in Matt Reeves' The Batman, possibly as Harry Dent / Two-Face, while Jamie Foxx and Giancarlo Esposito Esposito, not to be confused with the NHL hockey legend, are also rumored to be on the short list for a major role. All right, thanks a lot for the question, Steve. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just going to be blunt with you guys here. This was not something I was going to bring up as a story, but then I kind of figured we needed to because of the sheer amount of people who have been writing in it and bringing this up. The whole reason I want to bring this up about the John David Washington, who was obviously the star of my second favorite movie of the year last year, BlacKkKlansman. I thought he was terrific in that. I thought the movie was fantastic. He's obviously going to be in the new Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet. He's going to be the star of that along with Robert Pattinson. This dude is blowing up. This dude's blowing up. However, what I always tell you guys is when you see some kind of random story like this pop up, don't worry about how many sites are running with it. Look to where they're all getting that information from, all right? Look to where they're getting that information from. And in this case, all of these stories, all these sites that are running this headline, reports of, John David Washington, gonna be Two-Face and Batman and all this kind of stuff. It all comes from one place. It's a website that I'm not very familiar with called Geeks Worldwide. It's a website called Geeks Worldwide. That's where this is coming from. And let me say, before I go into what they're saying, I've got no problem with Geeks Worldwide writing this on their blog. I mean, we're going to get to their quote in a second here, but they're saying, hey, this is what we were told. So, hey, if that's what they were told, they got every right to get on their site and say, hey, we were told this. I have a problem with other sites who then are just desperate for headline material, then taking whatever any blog writes anywhere and making a headline out of it and confusing the audience. Anyway, over at Geeks Worldwide, who again, I have no issue that they wrote this themselves, but this is what they wrote, and I want to be very, very specific about looking at word for word what they wrote here. This is basically the entire article. I'm hearing, said the author of the post, I'm hearing Matt Reeves is paying close attention to BlacKkKlansman's John David Washington for a role in the Caped Crusader's new solo film. Character details remain under wraps, but we hear that Harvey Dent is one possibility. No formal talks have begun yet. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Again, let me emphasize, just so there is no confusion, I have no problem with some small independent blog, if they had heard something, sharing it with their own readers. Saying, hey, my readers, I heard this. Nothing wrong with that. I got zero problem with that in the world. But when you're a larger site, you've got to know that, okay, who did they hear this from? And what's their track record? And is this a major trade? Is this Deadline? Is this the Hollywood Reporter? Is this Variety? Is this one of the really reliable sort of trades and blah, blah, blah? And what is there to verify this, blah, blah, blah? And if there's not anything there, you shouldn't be running headlines. But what happens is one website picks it up and says, ooh, they're saying that, so I get to run it as a headline too. And then another website will do it, and then another outlet would do it. And then before you know it, the audience is seeing 15 websites pop up in their newsfeed all saying the same thing. Well, therefore, it's got to be true, right? This is what this reminds me of, guys. Back a couple years ago, when we just found out that they were going to be doing a Lion King remake, we just heard about this. Do you guys remember this? Stories started running everywhere that Hugh Jackman was going to be Scar. You remember this? It was everywhere. The headlines were everywhere. And then when you dug down and found out what the source was, it was from this obscure little site that I had never heard of. And they had a picture of Hugh Jackman at Disneyland one day. And they were saying, it's no coincidence Hugh Jackman's at Disneyland. We are hearing that Hugh Jackman is going to be Scar. It was an absolute, I don't even know if the little site exists anymore. And I don't know that it existed more than a month before this story came out. But it was an insignificant site. It had no traction, no following, but they wrote that, and all of a sudden, everybody ran with that headline. Hugh Jackman is going to be Scar. And it just caused a lot of confusion amongst the fans, because when it came out, Chiwetel Ejiofor said, well, wait a minute, I thought Hugh Jackman was, I read the report, Hugh Jackman was going to be. Go to the source. Again, I got no problem if somebody hears about that and shares it with their own audience, but to then run it as headlines is questionable at best. Rob, Is it impossible that John David Washington could end up in a Batman film? Completely just not impossible. The guy's blowing up right now. I mean, sure, why not? He's in a movie with the new Batman. And, Tenet's got him and Twinkleface. So we've got that coming. So sure, there's a possibility, but we knew that before this story came. My guess, though, is right now, Matt Reeves doesn't want to look like he's just picking up Christopher Nolan's sloppy seconds, and not only is he going to have Robert Pattinson as Batman, but he's also going to go get the other co-star from that same movie and put them together here. So I'm doubting the validity of this. It doesn't mean it's not possible. Look, this guy's huge right now. It's possible. But do I think anybody should be paying serious attention to this story? My answer personally is no. I don't think there's enough here to actually give it attention to. So anyway, Rob, you're reading about this. Are you thinking about something that maybe I'm overlooking at this point, or how do you look at this?
No, I mean, again, I totally agree with you. I mean, the Giancarlo Esposito thing, too, he's up for a role in the MCU or something. We're hearing that. But I think, look, John David Washington is on a rocket right now. His career is going out into the stratosphere. We've heard Matt Reeves has multiple villains in this movie. Unless Two-Face is a marquee villain the way Jack Nicholson's Joker was, John David Washington's not going to come in and play some bit part in a movie now. I mean, we saw him in BlacKkKlansman. He was great. He's going to be in Tenet, which is one of the most eagerly awaited films of next year. I mean, this guy's career is on a huge trajectory straight into the sun. And he's not going to do something, I think, that's not a front top line role yet, for a while at least. I mean, he's a leading man, and that's what he's going to concentrate on. And unless the Two-Face role is the feature antagonist in this movie, it's not going to be him. And
I think the best thing you just pointed out there, and to your point, which I think is really astute, is the fact that not only do I think he's probably not looking to play a two-bit role, but considering that the comic book genre right now is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it is the daffodil-filled fields to run and play with. Do you really want to come into whether it's the DC or the MCU as a small 2-bit character?
No.
That's going to be, no, you're going to hold out till I get to be a lead in a DC film, or till I get to play Green Lantern, or till I get invited into the MCU myself. It doesn't seem to make sense on that level, but hey, the new Batman film under Matt Reeves could be seen as a prestige move, I guess, but you're coming out of a Christopher Nolan film, so you kind of got that.
Right.
Aaron, you're looking at this. Would it make sense to you if you're John David Washington? And by the way, one of the best things about John David Washington's ascent to the heights right now is that it ain't on the coattails of his dad, because there are still a lot of people today who still don't realize that Denzel Washington is this dude's father, which I think is great, that a lot of people are recognizing how great he is, and they don't even realize he's Denzel's kid, which I think is awesome. Anyway, you're looking at this,
until
Aaron.
You just said it. So.
Oh, really? You didn't know that?
I know.
There you go. See, a lot of people don't.
That's great.
When you're looking at this situation, let's say you are, like, John David Washington follows you on Twitter, Aaron. And he's like, I've got this decision. Do I want to do this movie? I don't know. Do you think this is something that's actually real at this point? And would it be something that he even should consider doing?
Well, I mean, I agree with Rob and yourself. I think that if it were a marquee role, then sure, it would be something to consider. But no, he wouldn't be doing it if it was a small pop in and pop out, just a shoot for a few days villain. Also, the wording of the original post, it just screams publicist's assistant might have whispered to someone, right. Like, no formal talks have begun. Okay, then what are you even talking about? And Matt Reeves is considering him for a possible and sniffing around and maybe, and we hear it's possible. Like, there's just too many we hear and possible, but without anything to ground it. They are informal negotiations, but for what role we don't know. We speculate it could be Harvey Dent, and here's why. That's a different wording. But just the way the whole thing is worded, it just sounds like the assistant of someone on his team said to their buddy who runs this site, oh, hey, do this. And you never know. Sometimes the seeds that are planted can blossom into full-scale trees. So maybe this could be something that that Matt Reeves wasn't considering, and now he is. Stranger things have happened. I always feel really weird about that when things really take root and then because then if that person doesn't get the role, it's just a little awkward.
Yeah, particularly when it was never even a possibility in the
Right.
first place. So, again, we'll just have to see how this turns out. Guys, what do you think? Do you think there's any, true possibility that Washington could end up being in the Batman film? Yes or no? What are your reasons for either yes or no? I want to know what you guys think. Jump into the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. All right. With that down, let's now move on to the final main topic today. And our final main topic today comes to us from Rebecca Tileman, who writes, "Hi, John. I was lucky enough to be at your Comic-Con panel this year about where the MCU and comic book movies go after Endgame." Well, thank you for being there, Rebecca. I love the discussion. After it, I realized that while I had a great time watching Far From Home, it sort of felt like just another comic book movie. If you could break it down into 5 points that you think the comic book genre needs to address to stay relevant and fresh moving forward, what would they be? Thanks, and bring on filthy soup goop. All right, well, thanks a lot for that, Rebecca. And, this was the subject matter of the panel that we did at Comic-Con this year, is that when you really stop and think about it, Endgame, while not the greatest comic book movie of all time, it represents, the way I define it, it represents the fulfillment of the promise of what what comic book movies could be. Right? You had every conceivable character you could squeeze in there, big universe-altering ramifications on hand, a ton of fan service. It was everything that you could have thought a decade ago or more about what could a comic book movie be. Endgame was kind of the representation of that. And when we went to Comic-Con, the question we brought with us was, well, now what? Like, now where do you go? Because whether we like to admit it or not, amongst us as human beings is the law of diminishing returns. And it's like, now that we've had this the heights of the mountain, all that kind of stuff. They use law of diminishing returns with teenagers who start getting physical with each other. Remember, it might be thrilling to kiss right now, but eventually the kissing is going to get boring. You're going to want more, right?
Wait, what?
wait, newsflash.
Talk about soup goop.
Soup goop. There you go. Kids, we need to talk about soup goop. So, I mean, and so thus is the thing with video games. I keep on saying video games. With comic book movies, we've now reached the heights. We've got Endgame, the fulfillment of the promise of what it could be. So what do you do from here? Do you just keep doing what you've always done? Well, one of the examples I brought up at Comic-Con was the example of Apple computers. Apple, they've kind of been on the cutting edge. They are now the biggest company in the world. And what did they do back in the day when they were coming out with remember the first iMac, the Blueberry thing? Remember the first iMac? Revolutionized a lot of things. But what was the thing everybody talked about when it came out besides the weird look of it? It didn't have a floppy drive. It didn't have a floppy disk drive. The little hard square ones that everybody used. And they were leaving that out of their computer. And what they said was this: we know the storage needs of computer users moving forward are going to be well beyond the technology of these floppy drives. We think it's an obsolete technology, even though at the time everybody was still using it. They're like, we believe it was an obsolete technology. They were looking 3 steps ahead. The highest selling item they had at another point was one of their iPod models. Remember iPods, kids, before we had iPhones? Was one of their iPod models. It was their number 1 selling product. And in a shocking move at one of their events, they announced, we're discontinuing it. It was their number 1 selling thing. They saw 2 steps ahead. We're moving away from that. We're getting into these other things. And they discontinued it. Not that they discontinued iPods as a whole at the time, but the one particular product they had, they just canceled it. Because they were looking 2 steps ahead. Because Apple always understood, if you're doing great right now, your future plan can't be, just keep doing what we're doing, and everything will continue to be great and grow. And they knew that that's not the case. So now here we are with the comic book genre, the king of the mountain of all the genres, flying high, setting box office records, all that kind of stuff. But I would suggest, and I think a lot of people in the industry would suggest, that the plan moving forward for comic book movie genre cannot just be, let's just keep doing what we've been doing. That can't be the plan. You've got to be like Apple in that sense and think about, okay, let's get ahead of the game. How do we see these things changing? What do we need to introduce? Because you're either growing or you're dying. And it's one of the two, right? So what I asked Rob and Aaron and myself to do here is to follow what Rebecca asked. We're each going to give 5 things that we think the comic book genre needs to do here, both for the MCU and for the comic book genre as a whole. What we need to do to keep, and what these industries need to do to keep the comic book genre fresh and to keep it on top. All right. So that's what we're going to go into here. And I don't think any one of these are a magic bullet per se, but let's just go into them. And we're going to start off with my list here. And here's the 5 things that I would suggest. And you've heard me say a number of these things before. Here are the 5 things that I would say that they need to do. Number 1, keep changing levels. What do I mean by that? You can't have every movie be about saving the world. That eventually gets boring. MCU's already done a pretty good job with this, with things like Ant-Man, save the family, save the neighborhood, save the city, save the world. You can't just always have every movie being saving the world. You got to keep changing levels to keep it interesting. So they got to keep doing that. Number 2, create new characters for the screen. I would really encourage that both DC and Marvel to, while you have a vast, beautiful catalog of characters, why not take a shot and create a new character? Try stepping outside the box a little bit, and I say try creating some new characters moving forward and see what you can do with that. I just think that would be something interesting to try. Point number 3, exit the shared universe only box. I do not mean get rid of shared cinematic universe, but I would say try following along the path a little bit of what DC is doing with their Joker movie. Try a couple of one-shot movies that don't have to be handcuffed and be within the big shared cinematic universe. Not everything has to be in the shared cinematic universe. Number 4, go deeper on genre bending. We have seen the comic book movies try their hand at not just being comic book movies, they've been comic book comedy, comic book drama, comic book political thriller, comic book, horror we're seeing. I'd say keep moving down that path and go even deeper into the genre bending, mixing in, maybe even don't even look at yourself primarily as a comic book movie. Try doing a movie where we're primarily an action movie or a thriller movie or whatever, that is also happens to be a comic book movie. Just keep experimenting with that and keep changing up. And 5th and final for me is expand the appeal. 20 plus white dude movie leads. What I mean by that is this. We've already seen Marvel and DC moving away from this, but they have to commit to this course. The first 20 plus movies of the MCU were all, without exception, white male leads. And it worked. And it worked. It did. But you got to start expanding your appeal. You have to start bringing in new audiences and new people to get into this genre, because you're either growing or you're dying. And we are seeing Marvel starting to move away from, okay, we're going to stop this practice of excluding everybody but white male dudes as our leads. We got to stop the exclusion. So we're going to start opening it up more, but they've got to commit to that track. Now, great. We've got Black Widow movie coming. We got Shang-Chi coming. That's all great stuff. But these genres, these studios got to be committed to that path, or else they're not going to expand their base. So anyway, quick summary, keep changing levels, create new characters for the screen, exit the shared universe only box, go deeper on genre bending, and expand the appeal beyond just, never again should you do 20 films in a row where you're excluding everybody else except white male leads. So that's my 5, as I rush through it pretty quick. Rob, I'm sure some of yours are going to sound a little bit like mine. Maybe some of them are going to be quite different. But, as somebody who's got such a steeped, invested interest in the comic book genre as you do, and we've seen the success that they have, what are 5 things that the genre needs to do in these studios, particularly Marvel and DC, moving forward to make sure they stay fresh and stay on top?
Well, as you said, fresh new characters. Now, mine was a little broad, but whether they're new characters, I like the idea of creating new screen-only characters. But also, when I say fresh new characters, I call Shang-Chi a fresh new character because while I grew up loving Master of Kung Fu, I love the Paul Gulacy, Doug Mensch run. I think that we haven't seen that character before. People don't know that Shang-Chi was once an Avenger. Originally, his father was Fu Manchu, but that was retconned. But that's what I mean. Fresh new characters that people haven't seen before. We're getting that in Shang-Chi. We're getting that with the Eternals. It'll be interesting to see how Marvel moves forward. What's DC going to do? Relevant, allegorical, modern stories. What I mean by that is a lot of the great genre stories are great because they inform our lives today. Star Trek was certainly great about that.
Oh, yeah,
in the 60s, they would comment on the Vietnam War, but in the context of a science fiction, fantasy, action, adventure show. That's what these movies have to do more of. Winter Soldier. 70s political thriller, but it really was all about the information age and what are we going to do to protect ourselves in living in the age of big data. We need to see more of that. We need to make sure that superhero movies stay relevant to us as human beings and our world today. Inter-character relationships. I like when they mix and match characters that we've already seen and put them together. We know the appeal of the buddy cop movies like Lethal Weapon or 48 Hours or things like that. We're getting that with the Winter Soldier and Falcon. I want to see more of that. I love the idea of putting Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange together in a film. Mixing and matching characters you might not think of as being together, but once you have that heady concoction of putting them together, that frothy mix of awesome, then you're like, wow, that's what I want to see. I want to see
hashtag frothy mix of awesome.
Frothy mix of awesome. It's right up there with Soup Goop. They're kind of the same thing. 4. Character arcs that cover multiple films. One of the cool things about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is we saw a definite character arc with Tony Stark from Iron Man 1 all the way to the end of Endgame.
Right.
What we see is that these characters, it's not like they don't, in James Bond movies, we don't see a lot of change happening. And I think one of the great things about the Star Trek feature films is the characters were aging, and we're seeing them deal with that. I would like to see these characters go through a larger story, that when you watch their films separately, you might not notice, but when you put them all together, when you sit down and you watch Thor and you watch his growth from Thor 1 to the end of Ragnarok, he's not the same dude. And I think that's what is fulfilling about the MCU, is that these characters grow, and I want to see that more. And when I say a cohesive universe, I think it all goes down to planning. What I want to see is that I like, you talked about moving away from the shared universe, but making movies like Joker essential. But with things like the MCU, we have to make sure that these universes, the direction's plotted. I don't want to see it willy-nilly. I want to see that we had a great direction with Infinity War and Endgame, and that's what made it so satisfying. It felt like there was a real author's hand at work, and whether it was Kevin Feige or the various directors, I felt like I was being taken somewhere, that the MCU, like the Cylons and Galactica, they had a plan, and they executed that plan, and I felt I was better off or better for it as an audience member.
Well, okay, so so far there's 10 things, a little bit of overlap there. Aaron, you're sitting down and you're looking at, the comic book genre where it is now, and you start to think about what is going to be essential for this thing to stay relevant and to move forward into the future and to stay on top. What are some of the items that jump out to you that they really need to focus on?
Well, similarly to what Rob was saying, I think that, I said to mirror the political climate, use allegory. Shakespeare did that in all of his plays. The story was to project to the people what was going on in politics at the time. The court jester always told the king what was actually going on with the people, and that is that is where this craft actually came from, was to tell stories about what's going on with the people. So, agree with Rob, keeping it fresh, keeping it relevant. I love, exactly like I wrote, magical dreamlands. When we go into Wakanda, I am transported into a beautiful new place. There's so many exciting things to look at that capture my imagination. I don't want to see just like dark, these worlds that have been destructed. That's fine, but I also want to be taken to a magical place that really does allow for the suspension of disbelief.
Asgard, Atlantis, things like that.
Yes, all of them. Like, continue with that and go more in that direction. More female directors. Considering the fact that, that Captain Marvel has now surpassed the $1 billion mark, and of all the MCU films, we've only had one female director, and I'm blanking on her name, Sarah Alton.
Yeah. And she was co-directing.
Yeah, and she was co-directing with a man. So, there is something about Patty Jenkins directing Wonder Woman. We saw Wonder Woman through the female lens, not through the male gaze. And what I mean by the male gaze is that, not saying that that's a bad thing. It's not bad at all. It's just different. Men, heterosexual or even homosexual, it doesn't matter. Men look at women in a very different way when projecting them as the heroes. And I think that when you watch Wonder Woman, you see it in a different way, not just because it's a female-driven story, but because it also has a woman behind the lens. Imagine what could happen if you have Alexi Alexander, who does all those brutal fight scenes, who's so good at that, or an Ava DuVernay, who's incredible at narrating a story. Catherine Bigelow, I think they'd all be incredible female directors. More intersectional female heroes. Again, going back to Captain Marvel, seeing how the first MCU female-driven film has done so well. Let's have more of that, and not just white female superheroes, but Asian and Black and Latina. Like, let's really bring in a lot more of that diversity, because then you're just opening it up to a broader audience. Half the population, more than half the population, is women, and we have a lot of money, and we're totally happy to spend it watching movies if we get to see someone that looks a little bit more like we do. And my last thing is going along with also what you said, John, having some more diversity in overall, and getting away from the 20 plus white male leads. Always love a white male lead, but let's have them be part of the group of leads.
Now, and again, look, it's none of this to say is that a lot of things, everything's going great for the comic book genre right now, but It's just, if you're either growing or you're dying. You're either growing or you're dying. It's that. And if the comic book genre wants to keep moving ahead, you cannot just do business as usual. You had great success, but the best companies are ones that keep adapting, keep innovating, keep growing. And I think they need to learn some lessons here, grow the audience, grow their base, try new different types of stories. And, while a lot of people are a little bit lukewarm on the MCU Phase 4 announcements, the fact of the matter is they're doing some real different stuff. I mean, the multiverse of madness, Thor, Love and Thunder, like they're trying some very, very different things, and I think that's what this genre needs to do.
Well, I think we're going back to the thing that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, which is, why do we not see this particular genre of movies anymore, and this type of action hero? Well, because things go in and out of style. And right now, we're in a phase where we're really seeing the comic book genre. So how does the comic book genre not go the same way of the Commandos and Rambos and Rockies, those types of action hero-driven films, or the spaghetti westerns? How does the comic book genre stay relevant and not go the way of those types of films?
It's to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Always think 2 steps ahead. Don't think. And that's why I like Kevin Feige and why I like Walter Hamada. It's not just thinking what's working right now. It's what's going to be working 2 steps ahead. And let's see how that goes. Question is, guys, what would you say? I would love for you guys to jump into the comments section and list 5 things that you think. And remember, the option is not just keep everything the way it is, but what are 5 things that maybe you already see them starting to do, or that they need to commit to doing, or something new they need to do? What are 5 things you think that the comic book genre needs to embrace to move forward and stay at the top and stay relevant? I want to know what your guys' thoughts on that are. Jump down in the comment section below and let us know. All right, guys. That's it for all of our main topics today. We've got some live questions that we need to get to, but before we do that, there are a few other things going on in the world of entertainment going on, but we don't have time to make them main topics. But I want to make sure you're caught up to date. So right now, Fact Checker Jonathan proudly presents to you today's installment of the Movie News Feed. Check it out.
First up, after Edgar Wright wrapped up his Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy with 2013's The World's End, it seemed like the glory days of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost's long and storied on-screen relationship was over. From Slash Film, it was announced last year that Pegg and Frost will be reuniting for a new comedy horror series, Truth Seekers. The series has now landed at Amazon Prime Video. Amazon has also landed international rights to the show and will launch it as an Amazon original. The series stars Frost as one of a ghost hunting team who investigate a new paranormal incident every episode. Pegg will also star as Dave, a character for which there are few details. Pegg and Frost are co-writing Truth Seekers. Next up, we've known for a little bit that director James Wan's next film wouldn't be Aquaman 2, and last week we learned that he would be making a new horror movie before diving back into the world of Atlantis. From Cinema Blend, at the time, details were scarce about James Wan's return to the genre where he made his name, but the director has now opened the door just a smidge. Wan said the following: "There's been a bit of speculation as to what my next project is. All I'll say is, I'm super excited to go back to my indie roots with this hard R thriller, an original horror idea, not a reboot, remake, or anything based on existing IP, with old school practical effects and no giant blue screen sets." Next up, earlier this year, human star Gemma Chan made her Marvel Cinematic Universe debut as the Kree warrior Minerva in Captain Marvel. Now it appears that Chan may be returning to the MCU as an entirely different character. From ComingSoon.net, Chan is in negotiations to join the cast of Eternals. However, the report goes on to add that it's unknown if she will be playing Minerva in Eternals or a completely different character. Chan's appearance in Crazy Rich Asians greatly elevated her visibility, while Minerva was a relatively minor character in Captain Marvel. If Chan does return, she would probably have a larger role than her previous stint in the MCU. It's also worth noting that Serkis, the female lead of the Eternals comics, has yet to be cast. Chloe Zhao is directing Eternals. It will hit theaters on November 6, 2020. Next up, ABC's The Little Mermaid live special is back on, and it has set most of its core cast with Moana star Auli'i Cravalho as Ariel, Queen Latifah as Ursula, and Shaggy as Sebastian. From Deadline, The Wonderful World of Disney presents The Little Mermaid Live, featuring a mix of live-action, animation, and puppetry, will air November 5th to mark the classic Disney animated feature's 30th anniversary. ABC's President of Entertainment, Carrie Burke, had this to say about the project and other future projects. If it works, I expect we will do more of them, and we will work closely with the feature department about timing. Billed as a tribute to the original animated classic and its music, The Wonderful World of Disney presents The Little Mermaid Live will feature live musical performances by its star-studded cast interwoven into the broadcast of the original feature film. And finally, the OA will not be back for a third season at Netflix. From Variety, Season 1 of the OA debuted in December 2016, while Season 2 debuted nearly 3 years later in March of this year. The series received mostly positive reviews from critics, with the two 8-episode seasons averaging an 84% critical approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes between them. And that will do it for today's installment of the Movie News Feed.
And now you are all caught up to date on everything going on in the world of entertainment. Again, special thanks to fact checker Jonathan for bringing that up for us and putting it together. Now, guys, it's time for us to go over and take your live questions. You guys have been firing in a lot. Sorry, we were involved in this big conversation before we came back on, so I'm just trying to gather my thoughts back again. All right, so let's go over and start hearing what you guys have to say. And we're going to start things off here with Garish Tremby, who writes, what do you guys think about Netflix upcoming real-life Cowboy Bebop adaptation? And John Cho is a really good choice for Spike. Rob, I don't know much about the Cowboy Bebop thing. I know it's been talked about for a long time, and a lot of people discuss, but I really don't know much about it. What do you think about it?
I love Cowboy Bebop. I mean, I own the whole series on Blu-ray, as you might imagine, and I'm a huge fan of it. And I think John Cho playing Spike, he's going to be great. He might not have been everyone's first choice, but I've always liked John Cho as an actor, and I've never thought he's given his due as like a leading man. This is a very
What was that one he did last year with Deborah Messing?
There's Searching, which
so good.
I love that. I own that movie on Blu-ray. I actually bought that movie, and I think
you are single-handedly keeping Blu-rays alive.
Really, only that is keeping the whole industry.
Only specific ones. I mean, I've got very weird reasons why I own movies, but yes, and I think he's really, if there's going to be a star-making role in John Cho's life, this is it. Playing Spike, I mean, he's a very cool character, one of the coolest in all of Japanese anime, and I think that I can't wait.
All right, let's move on here. Film Boss writes, Jughead from Riverdale is Ross's son Ben in Friends. Yeah, I remember when that's first started, when Riverdale first started, and said, oh, by the way, that kid, he was Ross's kid in Friends. Like, really? And so, yeah, there's an interesting little side note there. Jonathan Teft writes, I think if the MCU starts to rely too much on watching the Disney Plus series to know what's happening in the movies, then the MCU could start to fall off. I'll tell you what, Jonathan, I don't think you're wrong. I think that's something they do got to be careful of. Like, do they make it where to watch our MCU movies, you're going to be lost unless you're also a subscriber to Disney Plus and watch the shows there? I remember one of the things that turned me off of comic books, actually, because I was really big into comic books a number of years ago, and then I fell off, was the fact that they started to doing these storylines that crossed all the titles all the time. And it suddenly became, okay, so if I'm going to follow the story, I can't buy 3 comic books this month. I've got to buy 14 comic books this month to keep up to date with what's going on. And I think Jonathan's onto something there, guys. I think they've got to try to find a way to make these Disney Plus shows relevant to what's going on, but make sure when you put up the movie, it's not something that the audience is going to be lost. Like, you're disqualified from watching this movie unless you watch what's going on in Disney Plus. Aaron,
But haven't
what
they
do you
already
think about that?
reported that they're planning on doing that? I feel like I read something somewhere that was saying that there will be. I don't think that you'll be totally lost. I think that would be a bad move on their part to do something as strong as that. But there will be Easter eggs within the TV shows that will only be relevant to the movie watchers if they're also viewers of Disney Plus. That's the plan.
They've also said, like, for instance, the upcoming Disney Plus series WandaVision, they said at Comic-Con will lead directly into Doctor Strange 2.
Right.
So, I mean, that's fine, Rob, as long as you don't say to the audience member, you don't even bother going to watch Doctor Strange 2 if you haven't seen WandaVision, right? Like, there's still a way to do it so you can be completely up to speed watching just the movie without the Disney Plus show. Like, shouldn't they do it that way?
Well, I think it's going to be kind of a combination. I think you'll be able to watch, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is my favorite title, I think, ever.
You giggle every time
I love it so
up.
much. I just love it so much. But when you watch the movie and you see Scarlet Witch, I don't think you're gonna have to know exactly what happened. But if you do know what happened in WandaVision, it's just going to accentuate your viewing pleasure that much more.
Yeah, it reminds me. Remember the Animatrix?
Yes.
It's like, if you saw the Animatrix,
the final flight of the Osiris, the first episode,
then it gives you a little bit of a broader appreciation for what's going on. But like most people, you didn't have to watch Animatrix to get what's going on in Matrix. And if they can do it on that level, then I think they'll keep the Disney Plus viewers happy. It'll keep the movie viewers happy. So we'll see how they do that, Jonathan. All right, Jonathan then follows up and writes, part 1 of 2. I think probably the last great action hero actor is Tom Cruise. I think a lot of that comes from him doing his own stunts. Even just watching him fly a jet in the Top Gun trailer is exciting because we know he's actually doing it. And, there is something, again, I draw the distinction, and maybe it's a false distinction, but I draw the distinction that when you think of those typical actors, the true pureblood action heroes from the 80s, that's pretty much all they did, hence pure action heroes. Tom Cruise is a multi-Academy Award nominated actor and all that kind of stuff, but he is picking it up. I mean, guys, as he's getting older, he understands his window is closing, and to do these types of films, so it really feels like he's doubling down on doing the action stuff. And I don't know, like, Aaron, could you make an argument that if you just appeared in our culture 5 years ago, could you make an argument that to you, Tom Cruise is just a pure action star?
Sure.
Could you look at it that
Born
way?
on the 4th of July is not in your sphere.
Right.
You're not aware of it. And all you see him doing...
Magnolia,
Right. You don't see any of those
Jerry
films.
Maguire.
Jerry Maguire. If you're looking last few years, you're looking at Mummy. You're looking at Mission Impossible. You're looking at Jack Reacher. You're looking at, he's kind of doing that. So I could see that, Jonathan. I could see going that way for that. Jonathan also writes, I'm cool with Andy Serkis directing Venom 2, but I really would have liked for them to have picked Travis Knight. I think Travis Knight did a really good job on Kubo and the Two Strings, clearly. And I think he did a wonderful job with Bumblebee. And if they had announced that Travis Knight was directing Venom 2, I'd be popping bottles. I think that's a great sounding thing. But I got to admit, I'm very intrigued for all the reasons that the three of us talked about earlier about Andy Serkis doing that. Dangerous Lee writes, I really wish that Disney treated the MCU more like Pixar. Non-shared universe with Easter eggs peppered throughout. I'd be down for that. Well, see, here's the thing, Dangerous Lee. I'm often lamenting the fact that everything has to be shared cinematic universe these days. That doesn't mean I don't love shared cinematic universe. See, I don't think it needs to be an either or. I don't think the MCU should do it like Pixar where everything is disconnected. But I also don't think that 100% of everything you do has to be within the same shared cinematic universe. I believe there's room for 5 or 10% of your stuff to be really great standalone heroes and movies that take place outside of the MCU. I don't think it's an either or. But maybe there's an argument to be made for that, Rob. I mean, do you see there being an argument for, like, hey, it should be one way or the other. It should either be all connected or it should all be disconnected. Or do you think it's somewhere in the middle, or how would you approach it?
Well, the MCU always took its cues from the comic book source material. Not exactly, but like the Winter Soldier storyline.
I like the way you put that. They take their cues from it. I like the way you put that.
Yeah, they're being informed by it, but they're not. They don't have a slavish devotion to it. We have to make it just like the comics. I mean, they went to Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America, which was called The Winter Soldier. which is a great run. They used that to inspire the movie, and it was done well. So I think Marvel, they understand that part of their appeal was being able to have these characters interact with one another. You know, you bring in characters you can do in Endgame, because we had things all the way back to Secret Wars and all the different crossovers in Marvel throughout the many decades. It's something that's fun for people, and then they go off and you do your single movies. You're going to get another Thor film, and you can watch a Thor movie, but then when you come back and do an Avengers, the Avengers movies were not saddled too much with what went on in the individual films. They were telling their own story. They had parts, they had threads that they were examining, but I think for the most part they've struck a really interesting balance, which is it's a tightrope to walk, but they've done a great job with it, and I'd love to see them continue doing so because it's fun.
Aaron, all connected, all disconnected, somewhere in the middle. What do you think?
Somewhere in the middle. It has to be. There's no reason to have it black or white.
All right, let's move on here. That was Jonathan. Now we move on to Jonathan again. I also think the MCU gets too experimental with movies like Doctor Strange 2 and Thor 4 when they could lose some of the general public audience. I would think if they get too... No, I agree. Look, I think you got to stretch the boundaries. You got to do things you haven't tried. You have to tread new ground. But it's almost like you got to break the boundaries to figure out where they really are. And I agree, guys. Seriously. I've always cautioned that there are like some comic book stories that may be popular with comic book fans, but they won't really translate well with the general audience. Like, you're going to lose some people if you go too far. And what I see things like Doctor Strange, Thor 4, I see them pushing the limits. Are they going to go too far? We won't know until we see it. But I like the idea that they're pushing the limits. Let's see how far. Let's not just assume how much the audience can take. Let's actually put it out there and see what the audience can take. And maybe we find that Multiverse of Madness is a little bit too wacky for the general audience and it turns some of them off. Okay, well, now we know to pull it back just a little bit. Or maybe we find out that, hey, they were very comfortable with Multiverse of Madness. Maybe we can push a little bit further. And I just think it's important they just not assume. But Rob, do you think there's a risk? Like, where do you when do you start taking into consideration we got to make sure we don't alienate the audience as we're trying to expand our audience?
See, I don't think they will do that. I don't think they're going to alienate their audience, but I do think that seeing different our characters that we know and love so much being put outside of their comfort zones. And when I say comfort zones, our comfort zone. When we get to see Doctor Strange, I don't know what a multiverse of madness. I don't know what that is. I know I want to see it, but I don't know what it is. And I hope it's different than being in front of Dormammu or in front of changing cityscapes, those Inception cityscapes we got in Doctor Strange 1. I don't know what it is, but I want it to be different enough that I feel like I'm getting something new. I don't just need Doctor Strange to fight some other Sorcerer Supreme, whether it's Mordru or whatever. I mean, give me something that I'm like, wow, that's really interesting and unique. And his relationship with Scarlet Witch was a lot of fun, and I didn't expect that. So I prefer that. But yet, there's going to always be a familiarity because it's Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch.
Aaron, do you think there's might be a line somewhere that the studios should be a little bit wary of about, hey, if we go too far, we could lose a lot of this general audience?
I don't think they're ever going to be in danger of losing a lot of the audience, because what they're also keeping is that while they are always pushing boundaries and keeping it fresh and introducing new characters and looking 2 steps ahead, they're also giving the audience what you want. There's a certain familiarity, not just with the characters, but if you're a fan of the MCU in general, but you're not totally familiar with Doctor Strange, you're still going to be able to go and see a Doctor Strange movie and know what you're getting. You know the tone, you know the flavor, you know that there's going to be a quality movie there, even if you're not necessarily familiar with that particular character himself.
All right. Let's take one here from MZod780, who writes, one of two. But John, you don't understand the reason Disney won't make Alita 2 is because they don't want competition with Captain Marvel. And the reason Alita didn't make any money was because Disney paid the critics, because they knew that it was a better movie than Captain Marvel, of course, with the sarcastic laughing face. Yeah, it one of the funnier things of the past little while is seeing how this big organized boycott of Captain Marvel performed. All I can say is, I hope they boycott a movie of mine sometime soon, so I can also make over $1 billion. JB Bonifacio writes, when Keanu was interviewed for John Wick 3, he said he refused to have the raid guys killed by John, going so far as to include more scenes of them. All out respect for their skills, a true action legend. I mean, I would have to read the interview myself. Because you know me, I don't think it's ever the actor's role to tell the director what they can and cannot do in a movie. I mean, I think it's fine for an actor to say what they personally feel comfortable doing or not doing. That's fine. But like dictating how much this character's in the movie, what direction the story goes, I don't think that should ever be the actor's role to dictate that. At the same time, yeah, like that was as much as I love The Force Awakens, you had a couple guys from the raid, and you use them for like 30 seconds and then they're gone. It's like, well, why bother bringing in the guys from the raid if you're going to do that? So I see some logic to that as well. Look, John Wick 3, to me, is a masterpiece of just wild action filmmaking. It's just a masterpiece of it. It is my favorite of the John Wick films. And I loved, not only did I love that they used those guys a little bit more, I loved how they used them. I love that while this fight to the death is going on in the movie, there's this clear mutual respect and this give and take in the fight that I thought just made the fight even all the more compelling and really enjoyable to watch. Rob, did you appreciate the way they handled that?
I did. I mean, again, as everyone knows, I don't call those movies The Raid. I call them The Rad, and then The Rad 2 even radder, because I love those movies so much because they are so rad. But I want to see those guys fight. You know, there's a new Netflix show starring one of them. I think it's called Woo Warriors or something. Woo Assassins. I'm not sure, but all I know is I want to see it. Anytime you can bring the raid guys in, just make them fight until they are dead. I mean, I just want to see them use their skills because they are. But I don't think Keanu Reeves is going to be like, well, you know, in deference to their skills. I think John Wick should fight them to the death. That's what it should be about. And the more we see him, the better off we are.
I do have something that I do want to challenge you on, John. I have seen actors, especially if an actor is the star of a series, especially the star of a franchise, and knows this franchise and is the name of the franchise, essentially. I have no doubt that Keanu Reeves is in a position to be able to tell the director, you know what, why don't we use these guys more? I mean, and also, he's Keanu. He bought all of his stunt guys in The Matrix. He bought them all Harleys. He spends his birthday with homeless people, feeding them. Like, this is the guy that is definitely looking out for everybody around him, not for number one. And so it makes absolute sense that he would go to the director and say, you know what, I'm the star of this. I have enough to do. These guys are really talented. Why don't we showcase them a lot more? That makes a lot of sense to me.
Good Canadian kid, by the way. Good Canadian kid. But it reminds me of something. There was this documentary called Showrunner. And it reminds me of something. I think it was the showrunner of... what was the David Boreanaz series?
Angel?
No, the one he did with the...
Bones?
Bones, yeah.
Right? They were talking to the showrunner of Bones. And he said, you know, with broadcast television, it's an interesting, delicate dance, because in the first season, I'm their boss. This is the showrunner talking about the stars of the show. In the second and third seasons, we're partners. In the fourth season, I work for them. Mm-hmm. And so there's something to be said about that. Going to your point, Aaron. So yeah, so as you got an ongoing series that is very one-person centered, it might become more like that.
I did the fourth season of Mad Men. So
that's right. You did. Which season were you in Nip Tuck?
I think it was the last season.
Was it the last season?
I think it was the sixth season, I think. I don't remember.
I loved Nip Tuck, and I have not watched when they went to L.A.
I don't know anything about the show.
Miami seasons. That show was bonkers.
It was wacky doodle.
I loved it so much.
But it was really fun.
All right, let's see. Last question we're going to ask with Aaron and Rob here, and then we're going to let them off to do the things that they need to do today. Jonathan Teft writes, shout out to the Chinese animated film Nizha. It just became the highest grossing animated film in China and is now China's 10th highest grossing film of all time. I was reading something about that, although I have to admit, maybe there's a tinfoil hat on my head, but I am a little dubious of Chinese box office reports of Chinese films. Some of the numbers that sometimes come out for some of those films are a little unbelievable to me. And I'm just saying, again, I'm not saying let's take any credit away. I'm just saying that usually when I hear Chinese box office numbers about Chinese films, I'm a little dubious. And maybe that's completely unfair. Maybe that's totally unfair of me, but I do get a little bit dubious in that. So let's get one more one here just so we can get the guys to answer here. The official Ice Packalicious writes, I might be late to the game, but I just seen the trailer for Queen and Slim, a movie, and wow, just powerful. I know it's just a trailer, but it looks powerful. I got a couple of tears out of me, not gonna lie. The trailer is great. The first teaser that came out, I was okay. It's a movie. It looks like an indie kind of film, character driven. All right, that might be interesting. Then I saw the full trailer. And actually, it's funny you mentioned it because Ann and I just went to go watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again the other night, and they played that trailer again in front of it. And it's got a little bit of the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, a little bit of Bonnie and Clyde, a little bit of, urban legend material in there. It just looks really good. Aaron, have you seen the trailers for this?
I haven't seen the trailers, but I know Jody, and she. We went to a party that was celebrating her, the movie about the movie being out there as far as the trailer going out, and just seeing all of the excitement around her was really exciting. And she's a phenomenal human being, and absolutely. As hard to believe as this is, even more stunningly beautiful in person than she is on the screen. And so I'm really excited to see this too.
Rob, have you seen the trailer for this?
Yeah, and remember, I didn't know what this movie was until we saw the first clip of it. I guess it was the teaser at CinemaCon.
At CinemaCon, right, yeah.
And this was not on my radar. And it's right up my... I love outlaws or anybody that's accused of a crime and goes on the lam, and then we have the racial tensions that are part of this film. This is so in my wheelhouse, and this new trailer, right to the top of the must-see list, this movie. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And listen, guys, that will do it for all the time that we have here today for Rob and Aaron. They've got other things they got to do, but don't worry, we're going to keep answering questions for the next half hour or so. But, Rob, one of the reasons I love having you here is that not only are you entertaining to watch and listen to, I feel like I learn something new every day that you're here. Rob, where can people find you online as you dispense with all your worldly wisdom?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, but if I might say so, you should also follow Erin, because I do love her Twitter feed.
Oh, Lord.
And you can find me also on Instagram at RMBurnett, or find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work, and its adjacent website, theburnettwork.net.
And the aforementioned Aaron Cummings. Aaron, where are people going to be able to find you besides swimming, swimming across an ocean here pretty soon?
That's very true. I've been swimming laps. I just started swimming yesterday, and my deltoids are feeling it. Thank you for that shout out, Robert. I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Aaron L. Cummings, or if you are a podcast listener, I invite you to listen to me on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts on my show, Kappa Cancer.
I think one of the highest rated podcasts in the world would probably be if we actually recorded our off-camera conversations.
I think so, absolutely.
Of course, I will never allow those to be released.
No.
But I think it would be some of the most listened to
Give them to Mark Burnett. They will never see the light of day.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot for being here, guys. It's always thrilling to have you, and we will talk to you guys later. So, Aaron, you'll be back on Thursday. Rob, you'll be back in again tomorrow, and we will see you guys then. All right, let's keep on moving now, guys, with your questions. You guys still have a lot coming in, so let's keep rolling here. James Bonner writes, Hey, John, I was curious. The Exorcist is for me what An American Werewolf in London is for you. Can't watch the damn thing without losing sleep for the next 2 to 3 days. What, if any, are your thoughts on The Exorcist? Well, I'll be honest with you. Exorcist is one of those movies that I think is great. Unlike the original Halloween, I'm not actually a fan of the original Halloween, and everybody gets mad at me when I say that, but the original Exorcist, yeah, it's great. Do I hold it in the same esteem as a lot of other people do? To be honest, no. It's not like one of my, oh my God, it's like one of the all-time greats of everything. I'm not, but I really do appreciate the film. I rewatch it every couple of years for whatever reason. And it's one of those films that's like The Godfather in the sense that when you watch The Exorcist, you start to recognize a lot of the things that how modern horror films and even horror films of the past 15, 20 years have been influenced by The Exorcist, right? When you see it for the first time, like, oh my gosh, like you start to see all these things that how other horror movies have been influenced by it. And that's a major, major thing. So yeah, I'm a fan of The Exorcist, James. All right. Nathan Oswald writes, who's more responsible for continuity, script supervisor or the director? Well, overall, the director. but the person the director most relies on set will be the script supervisor. But that's like the buck stops here. Who's most responsible for, the meal that you have at the restaurant? The chef or a sous chef? Well, the sous chef had to do a lot of things on it, but ultimately the buck stops here person is the director. And the director's got people they rely on to make those decisions, but ultimately it's the director. Nathan also writes, the only movie I felt insulted by was Vacation 2015. That movie makes Vegas Vacation look like Citizen Kane. It's a disgrace to the entire franchise. If you're talking about the one with Ed Helms, I've got to agree. I did not like it. No, look, I didn't think the Ed Helms Vacation was like a burning dumpster fire. I just didn't think it was good. It was disappointing. And it was by the guys who later went on to write Spider-Man Homecoming, and they directed Game Night, which was great. Like, it's hard for me to believe that the same guys who directed Vacation also directed Game Night, because I think Game Night was great. And now they're doing a Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I'm very stoked about and very excited about. Rufino Salazar Jr. writes, good day to you all. Love the show. Thank you so much, Rufino. Appreciate that. And we love having you around. Captain Confidence Entertainment writes, The Apostle with Robert Duvall changed me spiritually and as an actor. Has a film made you reevaluate your life or inspired you to better yourself in any way? Oh my God, you don't have to go any further back than the documentary last year of Mr. Rogers. Not Won't You Be My Neighbor. Is it Won't You Be? Yeah, it's Won't You Be My Neighbor. And why I continue to this day to get choked up. One of the things that I said about that documentary was there are great movies that change the way you see the world. But then there's the very rare movie that changes you just by watching it. And I watched that documentary on Mr. Rogers, and this is what great people do. Great men, great women. This is what they do. They inspire you. And stories about them can inspire you. And that is a movie to me, and that is a human life to me. And one of the reasons why I'm so looking forward to the dramatization with Tom Hanks called Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I am so excited about this. And that documentary last year, it shook me. And I'm not kidding when I say shook. Like, there are times when I get so emotional, whether it's strong outward emotion, inward emotion, whatever, that, I'll shake. Sometimes you hear somebody get so angry that they shake. Yeah, that's happened too. But sometimes I'm so overwhelmed emotionally by something, I just shake. And I remember coming out of that Mr. Rogers documentary and literally shaking because it made me want to look at my life and myself. What am I doing to try to make my world a better place? How am I treating the people I meet on the street? Am I the type of person who, when a friend is in trouble, they know they can come to me no matter what? Am I living my life that way? Fuck what I'm doing on YouTube. Who cares? But in my real life, what does that look like? And I was so overwhelmed by the inspiration of it all, but also by the shame of it all. I just came out shaking, and it totally made me want to reevaluate my own life. It really does. It makes you want to there are movies like that make you want to take inventory of your own life. And that was a movie that did it for me. And that's just another one of the reasons, man, why I love the movie so much. Anyway, Cameron Ross writes, trailer for Titans Season 2 dropped. Looks amazing. I haven't seen it. I'll probably go and look at the trailer. I'll be honest with you. It's going to have to be a really good trailer because I think I've tapped out of Titans. I was not impressed with Season 1. It had its moments. It definitely had its moments. And full marks it for filming in my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. But I think I'm tapped out. But I'll give the trailer a shot, Cameron. I'll give the trailer a shot. Let's see if it gets me on board for Season 2. Cameron also writes, just saw Inglourious Bastards for the first time, and the scene where Brad Pitt and crew are pretending to be Italian kill me. Grazie. Arrivederci. Brad Pitt is so good in that movie. And what's funny is Inglourious Bastards, I've never had a movie like this ever happen to me before. I saw Inglourious Bastards for the first time, and I hated it. Didn't just dislike it, I hated it. I really thought it was terrible. Then I was on this date. The girl came over to hang out at my place, and it's like, what should we watch? She wanted to watch Inglourious Bastards. So I'm like, all right, we'll watch Inglourious Bastards. Even though I didn't want to. And I watched Inglourious Bastards again. I'm like, wait, what did I see before? Because I love this movie. Like first time I watched it, hated it. The second time I watched it, completely fell in love with it. I've never had that experience before. Going that direction. Absolutely hated it the first time I saw it, and then completely fell in love with it. And it's like my second or third favorite Quentin Tarantino movie now. Second or third favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. And I hated it the first time I saw it. It's kind of crazy. Cameron Ross also writes, I want to be an actor one day in one of Rob's films. Well, first of all, I think we'd all love to be an actor in one of Rob's films. I think that would be a lot of fun. So, hey, next time he gets a big movie going, Cameron, make sure you send him your resume. Bames John writes, hello there. Hope you're having a great day. I am having a great day so far. What's your favorite John Ford film? Mine is Stagecoach. John Ford, he is one of the few directors who I believe, if I'm remembering it correctly, he actually won Academy Awards back to back. I believe he won one of the few directors ever who won Best Director at the Academy Awards back to back. And I'm trying to remember what those, I think one is How Green Is My Valley. There was Grapes of Wrath was one of them. Is Green My Valley? Hold on a second. Let me just pull up this thing here. Okay, here we go. The one I'm thinking of was, How Green Was My Valley. That was the one I was thinking of. Stagecoach, by the way, he was nominated for Best Director. He was nominated for Best Director 3 years in a row and won 2 years in a row. So 1940, 1941, and 1942, he directed Stagecoach, Grapes of Wrath, and How Green Is My Valley. And he lost for Stagecoach. He won for Grapes of Wrath and How Green Was My Valley. He won those two back to back. And I believe that is the only time. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that is the only time in film history that a director won Best Director in back to back years. I think. Could be wrong about that, but I think. It's definitely, I think, the only time when a director won or was nominated for Best Director 3 years in a row. Haven't seen it since. But I guess I'm going to go... I'll probably go Grapes of Wrath on that one. That's where I'll go. All right. Timbula the Spider Monkey writes, hey, y'all. Thanks for putting this up early enough for me to able to comment on favorite David Cronenberg film. Mine is either The Fly or Videodrome. I think I have to go with The Fly as well, but let me bring up, just to make sure I'm not, wait a second. Why am I not getting this right? David? Oh, that's why. Sorry. I misspelled David. All right. So if I'm going to look at his films that he's directed, the one that comes to mind for me most is The Fly. Naked Dead, Rangers, Fly, Dead Zone, Videodrome, Scanners, The Brood, Fast Company, Rabbit, yeah, I'm going to go with The Fly. I mean, the Brundlefly is, that's just one of the, by the way, that's a remake. The Fly, Cronenberg's The Fly was a remake. A lot of people forget about that. But it is also one of the big arguments about why remakes can be awesome. The Fly is a great example of that. So I'm going to go with that one. Let's see here. Michael Alcott writes, number one, do you find websites that exist to intentionally leak movies annoying? Making Star Wars has the entire climax of Episode 9 mapped out. It's August. Yes. By the way, it might be real and it might be true or it might not be. So whatever. But yeah, I think there's a special circle of hell for that. Leaking something isn't news. That's stealing information and then ruining the experience for a lot of people. So yeah, yes, I find that I find that annoying. And Michael says, a caller on a show blurted it out. To me, it sucks. I mean, that's the other thing. When you're a website and you start publishing all that kind of stuff, you've now made it impossible for people who want to avoid spoilers. And by the way, 90% of the time, this leaked stuff ends up not being real and not being true, but sometimes it is. And when you're a website that leaks this stuff, well, guess what? You've guaranteed now that most people who don't want to be spoiled are going to get spoiled, because you've just armed all the trolls who are now going to take all that information and start spam blasting all the other sites and all their Twitter streams, all the chat boards and everything. It's going to be impossible for people to avoid it. And yeah, I think onus is on people who take that information and disseminate it. And if the stuff is true at Making Star Wars, which is a site I like, by the way, but if the ending of Episode 9 is true and they've just released it to people, congratulations, you just ruined the movie for millions of people. Well done. I mean, I don't see any justification for doing that. It annoys me. But then again, 90% of the time, this stuff doesn't end up being real anyway, so who knows? Let's see. Marv Diesel writes, I know you don't like the line in Star Wars Episode 3 about having the high ground, but it never bothered me considering the higher ground's always been the most advantageous and classical military advantage point. Yep, I get that. But the problem is, go through that fight scene again. Go through that fight scene again. There are multiple times in that thing when, look, it's different that my army's on the mountain, and we're going to keep you from coming up the mountain. He is literally 1.5 feet higher than Anakin, right? And when you go through that fight scene, there are multiple times in that sequence when one is in a slightly more elevated position over the other. And they don't stop the fight and go, give it up, man. I've got the high ground. I mean, it's clearly over now, right? Now the fight's done. I'm 2.5 feet higher than you are. That's the part to me that really got it. Like if everything else, they were fighting in Tatooine on a flat plane, and then all of a sudden, Obi-Wan stood on a rock that put him 3 feet higher than Anakin and said, I have the high ground, Anakin. It would still be ridiculous. It would still be ridiculous. But when you look at it in context of the fight overall, and again, I get it. You're at a slight advantage if you hold an elevated position, but not to the point that a Jedi Master should go, well, fight's over. I got the high ground. And Anakin should just go, nuts. Well, I've got no chance of winning now. I mean, it's just, yeah, man, that is just a line that to me, I mean, if it didn't bother you, that's great. There's a lot of lines in movies that bother other people that don't bother me. The Martha line in Batman v Superman, for example, it actually doesn't bother me. I see a different meaning in that line. So this is one that does bother me, but it doesn't bother you, and that's totally great. All right. Brandon Blake writes, is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood the funniest Leo has been? I think so. He was certainly funny in it, but I thought he was very funny in Catch Me If You Can. Now, Catch Me If You Can is a very different movie, granted, and we don't see Leo do a lot of pure comedy ever. So, I mean, there's that too. But if it's not the funniest he's ever been, Ryan or Brandon, it's amongst the funniest he's ever been. Ryan Lohner writes, L.A. Confidential is one of my favorites, but also has Kevin Spacey hanging out a lot with a young gay actor. No idea what I'm supposed to do with that. I don't think there is a correct answer for that. A lot of people have asked me about the Kevin Spacey situation, and and again, I'm not justifying this. I'm just saying this is the way my head works, and I don't know why it works this way. I'm not saying this is the right way to think. I'm just saying this is the way my brain kind of functions. The way my brain functions is this. I can't imagine watching anything that Kevin Spacey does here forward without feeling very uncomfortable. But for some reason in my brain, I have no problem. Like, if there's a movie I've already seen him in before, I have no problem rewatching it. It's like there's a disconnect in my brain. I have absolutely no sense because I experienced this movie before there was any drama, and therefore it's kind of like insulated in my head. Now, I don't think I can go back and watch an old Kevin Spacey movie that I hadn't seen before and feel comfortable. But like all of his other, whether it's American Beauty, whether it's Usual Suspects, whether it's whatever. I can watch just about any other Kevin Spacey movie and it doesn't affect me in any way because it's like I said, it's insulated because to me it's separated. Again, I'm not saying that's the right way to look at it. I don't choose to look at it that way. That's just the way my head kind of works and I got no explanation for it. Toonie2 writes, the Star Wars trolls are still doing their job. Just watched a video. Somebody talked about what we know so far about Episode 9 and his excitement, and you can imagine how the comments look like. Yeah, I mean, that's just trolls are trolls. Look, when you specifically ask me about what do I think about the Star Wars prequels, I will tell you when a topic comes up relevant to the Star Wars prequels, I will say I don't like the Star Wars prequels. But hey, God bless you if you do. That's all. If you do, all film subjective. If you love it, that's great. I don't ever want to take away anybody else's love for, you know, whether it's Clone Wars, because I don't like Clone Wars. And everybody looks at me funny. But I don't want to take away anybody else's joy. But if Clone Wars comes up, I'll tell you I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. Fine. But if you love it, that's great. I celebrate that. I'm not going to go out and try to kill the thing you love. I don't like the prequels. But if you do, that's great. I mean, I'll talk openly about why I don't like it. But if you love them, I think that's great. I hated Light Between Oceans. I hated Assassin's Creed. I mean, there's a lot of movies I don't like and hate, and I'll tell you that I don't like, and if I hate them, I'll tell you that I hate them, whatever. But, you know, I'm never going to try to get you to not like it. If you like it because it works for you, awesome. I will never understand the pathetic need that we as a very flawed species has, that if just somebody somewhere else expressed their love for something, I have to jump, this need that we feel, I got to jump in there and try to shit all over their love of something. It's like, why? Like if I see people post about, for instance, take my friend Kyle Newman, right? Kyle loves the prequels. He loves the prequels. He will defend the prequels, come hell or high water, all that kind of stuff, right? And Kyle will often post up on social media, you know, why he thinks the prequels are misunderstood, why he thinks the prequels are underappreciated, why he thinks we should hold the prequels in higher regard, and the benefits he sees of the prequels, right? Great. Okay, I don't agree with them, but I don't understand the need some people feel that I got to jump onto that and say, no, they suck, and you suck for liking them, blah, blah. I'll never understand that. That's the sign to me of very insecure people. That's the sign of very insecure people. And we as a species, we're a pretty insecure bunch, aren't we? And we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. Some of us just try not to do it, although I'm sure I do it sometimes too, because, you know, we're flawed. But I'll never understand that. I'll never understand the desire to crap on somebody else's love of something. You know, take Robert Meyer Burnett, for example. He hates Star Wars Discovery. He hates it. And I know he hates it. And he'll talk about how he hates it. But I love it. And if he ever sees me put up some random social media post about really liking Star Trek Discovery, Rob isn't going to jump in, no, it sucks, how dare you like that, blah, blah, blah. He's not going to try to shit on the fact that I enjoy it. He's not going to try to shit on my love of something. He doesn't agree, but he knows that we disagree on that, and he doesn't feel the need. It's not like me loving Discovery undermines his hatred of it. It doesn't. Nor does his hatred of Discovery undermine my love of it. So I can respect that he dislikes it. He respects that I do like it, right? To me, it's just the sign of a really insecure mind. When you see somebody loving on something that you feel a hair trigger need to jump in and try to crap over their love of something. It doesn't mean you need to love what they love. It doesn't mean you can't say on your own channels that, hey, I don't like this and here's why. But this underlying need we seem to have as a very flawed species, that if I don't like something and somebody else does, that I feel somehow empowered to jump over and try to crap on them and their love of something. And that I'll never get. I'll never get that. You know, I just, you know, ask me if I like Light Between Oceans, or ask me if I like X-Men Dark Phoenix. I'll tell you no, and I'll sit here and have a discussion with you about why I don't like it. But if you put up a post saying that to you, it's the greatest movie of the year, I might at most say, I disagree, but I'm not going to sit there and crap on you or your love of it. And I think that's really something that film fandom, it's not just relegated to just these Star Wars people. It's something that we as film fandom need to address and look at and really self-examine about, because it's just plain destructive, you know? Anyway, that's just my thought. Okay, Chris Martin writes, love Schnepp's documentary, The Death of Superman Lives What Happened. I highly recommend everybody checks that out. Makes me really want to see what that movie would have been. Love Burton's 2 Batman films. Best thing is when a movie leaves you wanting more. You know, it's funny because, first of all, I adored Schnepp's documentary, Death of Superman Lives What Happened. I was really honored. Schnepp did a 2-night premiere at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood of The Death of Superman Lives What Happened. On the first night, he had the great Kevin Smith moderate the Q&A. I got to do it on the second night. And I just love the movie. I love the documentary he made. I'm a little bit biased because I know the people who make it. John and Holly made it, and I know them. And so obviously I'm a little bit biased. But still, true up, I love the movie. I thought it was great. But Schnepp and I always disagreed on whether we were happy that movie didn't get made or bummed out that movie didn't get made. Because Schnepp really thought that movie could have been special. He really thought the Superman Lives, he thought that movie could have been really good with Nicolas Cage and Tim Burton. He thought that movie could have been great. Whereas I watch Schnepp's documentary and I'm like, whew, thank God that never got made. You know what I mean? So we had like completely different points of view on that. But seriously, whatever point of view you have, John Schnepp's documentary, The Death of Superman Lives What Happened, is definitely one you should check out. So thanks for doing that, Chris. All right. Victor Gonzalez writes, iPic Theater Chain has filed for bankruptcy. Yeah, I was really bummed to read about that because it is one of my favorite movie-going experiences. You know, we've got an iPic in Pasadena now. The report I read doesn't say they're closing down. It says they're filing for financial protection going into bankruptcy, and then their plan is to find a buyer for the theater. So hopefully they're not going to be shutting down. Going into bankruptcy doesn't mean they're shutting down. That could be the outcome, but right now, I hope they find a way to stay in business, Victor, because I really do like that theater. K Major writes, sends in a really big super chat. Thank you, K Major. Appreciate you supporting the channel on that level. Damn it, John. Every time you talk about the awesomeness that is the great King Theoden, I have to go watch Two Towers and Return of the King. He quietly became my favorite character after multiple watchings. Gandalf, strong second. King Theoden. I'm telling you what, we talk about this all the time, and it's true, but there are many lines in Lord of the Rings that are grrr moments, right? That are just highlight emotional moments. The best of which to me is at the end of Return of the King when, Strider comes out. He's now king, and all of Middle Earth is assembled there for the coronation of the king. And he comes up to the 4 hobbits who start to bow, and the king says, "My friends." I'm getting chills. You can't see it, guys, but the bumps on my arms are popping up like crazy, and the hair on my arms now all standing up just thinking about this scene. He comes to these hobbits and says, "My friends, you bow to no one." And then the king bows and takes a knee in front of these 4 hobbits, and then all of Middle Earth get down on a knee and take a knee to these 4 hobbits. It's amazing, but right up there with it, you know, there had been an ongoing discussion about whether Rohan is obligated to get involved. They're overstretched as it is. Should they go and get involved in the problems of Gondor that they're having, blah, 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 blah. And then the torches on that scene with the torches on the mountainsides getting lit. And Strider sees it. And he goes rushing into the throne room where King Theoden is there. And he proclaims, "The torches have been lit. Gondor calls for aid." God, I'm getting chills thinking about this. And the camera moves into Theoden, who's got this grim look on his face and a moment of reflection, and he goes, "And Rohan shall answer." Ah! Grrr! Like, if you're like, grrr, like, damn right, that is one of the greatest moments in cinematic history. Gondor calls for aid. And Rohan shall answer. Damn right. It's just so, there are moments in movies I could talk about every day and still just get completely emotionally overwhelmed by it. And that scene, and Theoden, by the way, has got a number of those scenes in The Lord of the Rings, but absolutely one of the best characters. Absolutely Cave Major, one of the best characters. All right. Rude Shot writes, will CW adapt The Dark Knight Returns with Routh versus Conroy? Oh, I doubt it. I doubt it. That seems like a big stretch. That's a big stretch from this little fun novelty crossover thing and having Routh as Superman, which I love, and having Conroy as an old Batman, which I love. There's a big jump between that and actually doing a Dark Knight Returns with that's a huge step. So, I mean, wouldn't it be cool? But no, I don't think that's going to happen. Not to mention Conroy, I don't think could physically play the role. He can be an old man Bruce Wayne, but being Batman from The Dark Knight Returns, you got to get a Stallone or something like that to play that role, I would think. Willow Yang writes, I'm glad to see Cameron Britton back as Ed Kemper in the new Mindhunter trailer. He was so good in the first season. He was amazing in the first season. And listen, we've been talking about this on the show recently with Mindhunter Season 2 coming back. Cannot recommend highly enough that you guys check out Mindhunter Season 1. It is a vastly different show than what I thought it was going to be, but it was also a vastly better show than what I thought it was going to be. It's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I cannot wait to watch this season of it. I hope it's a step up. At least what I mean is I hope it's not a step down from the previous one, but whatever. The first season was so damn good. Take Willow's advice, ladies and gentlemen. Check out this show and get yourself ready for season 2, because this is one of my most anticipated stuff coming up on television. Mindhunter Season 2 is one of my most anticipated things coming up on television. I'm really excited about it. All right. Krypton Caged writes, hi, John. About the Snyder Cut. We always knew that the cut is not finished. Oh, no, no, no. No, 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 no. Stop right there. Stop right there. Because I know, and a bunch of people know, that the Snyder Cut was never an actual finished cut of the movie that Warner Brothers could just release. Sure, a bunch of people knew that. But don't say, well, we always knew it was. No, 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 no. Because every time, Krypton, that I would mention on my show or something's like, guys, yes, he's got cuts of these films, but these are not completed versions. These are edits he put together of all the footage he shot. And yes, those exist, but there is not a completed version of this movie that is just ready to be released in theaters. Every time I would say that, I would get flooded with responses and messages saying, you don't know what you're talking about, Campea. Yes, it does exist. Look, here's a time when Zach said that it exists. Yeah, but he didn't say a finished, completed post-production, all that kind of thing exists. But so don't tell me, Krypton, don't tell me that people didn't think there was a fully completed version out there, because every time I would mention that there wasn't, I would get flooded with messages of people telling me how stupid I am. Right? And now, of course, Kevin Smith's come out and confirmed that, no, I've talked to everybody in production. No finished version of this movie exists. And that kind of ends it. But yeah, so don't tell me that everybody just knew that that's not what they were talking about, because I beg to differ. People really did think that. Anyway, but what you're referring to isn't an assembly cut, but the Snyder Cut isn't an assembly cut. It's at least 80% finished with VFX, coloring, etc. I don't believe that's true either. When Snyder said that it's done, he meant the shooting is done, but he said some scenes, mostly including Steppenwolf and Darkseid and some Cyborg scenes, haven't finished VFX because of the changes. No, that's what I was saying all along. That when he said, yeah, I've got a cut, remember, Snyder said, yeah, there's a cut. Actually, he said, there are several cuts. But there's a lot of stuff that was never done on it. Tons of stuff. From ADR and Foley and musical scoring and the visual effects and all the various post-production, color correction, and blah, blah. There's a ton of, it was never 80% done. Anyway, Junkie XL also said that the entire score was finished. Yes, the score was done, but it wasn't done with the particular scenes. He didn't do 18 different versions to go with all these different cuts Snyder has. said that the entire score was finished, but not sure if it was added to the movie. This is not confirmed, so there's that. Just watch the first trailer Snyder put out. It's 80 to 90% done, but the full cut wasn't done. That's the thing. Anyway, the Snyder Cut is a completely different movie, John. The majority of the story was changed in the theatrical cut. To oversimplify it, rumor is it still needs $20 to $40 million to finish the VFX. Yeah? By the way, needing $20 to $40 million to finish the VFX means this is nowhere near an 80% done thing. Nowhere near an 80% done thing. Anyway, when we say release the Snyder Cut, we want it to be released in the current form. But no, you say that, Krypton, and I believe that you mean it that way. But again, don't pretend that's what everybody thought. Because when I would tell people that this Snyder Cut thing, a completed, ready-to-be-released version of the film does not exist, I got massive backlash from that. So I appreciate that you knew that was the truth. But there are tons of people that just still refuse to believe that. Anyway, we want it to be released in the current form. If WB doesn't want to put more money into a movie, that's already a flop. Yes, there are some toxic fans in this movement, but most of us just want to see it. And by the way, Justice League wasn't a flop. It made money. It underperformed and it disappointed, but it made money. So, Justice League wasn't a flop. It made money. And look, I get it. I've always said there's an incomplete version of that film that exists. Absolutely, it does. No doubt. And if some people understand that and they just like to see that, well, Warner Brothers isn't going to release that. Of course they're not. But if there are just some people who understand that it's an incomplete version and they just want to see it as it is, I respect that. Why not want to see that? I mean, Warner Brothers isn't going to do it, but I can respect that. But again, Krypton, to your point, you are very, very wrong when you say that all of us know that there wasn't actually completed. No, because when I would say that, I would get a hell of a lot of people criticizing me, saying, oh, Campea, you don't know what you're talking about. No, I do know what I'm talking about, and most people know what we're talking about. It's just you're not listening. You're not listening to what Zack Snyder's actually saying. Zack Snyder himself never said there's a 100% all post-production, everything done, completed version. Zack Snyder never said that. And just by going by what Zack Snyder said, that's what we get. So I appreciate that you understood that, but there are a lot of people who didn't. Anyway, Carter2480 writes, does Andy Serkis directing Venom 2 end his chances of potentially being in the Batman? I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. The time frame is too close together because it sounds like they want a Venom movie out in 2020 or 2021. And when you're directing it, you're not just directing for 3 months. And when you're acting, you can just pop on set for a month or two and be done. When you're directing, it consumes your life. So, and considering these projects are going to be so close together, I unfortunately, Carter, am going to have to agree with you. I think, yeah, that probably does end any potential that he's going to be in Batman. Krypton Cage writes, and sorry for bringing this up again. I know you're tired of talking about it. I'm just very passionate about it and wanted to share it with you. No, and I appreciate that, Krypton. It's totally great to be passionate about it. And look, if you're one of the level-headed people that you're like, hey, I get it. It's not a finished version, but I just like to see whatever it is in whatever state it's in. I have nothing but respect for that. I can totally respect that. Again, I don't think Warner Brothers will ever do it. And if I was Warner Brothers, I wouldn't. But I can totally respect that as a fan. You would just like to see what it was going to be. Even if it's not completed, you just like to see what it's going to be. And I can totally respect that. All right, Tristan Larson writes, It's Always Sunny is the funniest show of all time. And one I've never watched. I mean, I think I've seen an episode or two. And I'm not saying it's not great, but I've just never had enough people tell me that I absolutely should watch it. So it's one I've never really seen. Clever to Swear writes, Soylent Green is people. Please impersonate Heston. No, I'm not going to do impersonations on demand. But I did do the whole Soylent Green is people. I did that yesterday, remember? Clever to Swear also writes, do actors get paid extra for kissing ugly people? Oh, come on, man. That's not a cool thing. That's not even funny. Clever to Swear writes, Sigh, there's no Snyder cut in the Endgame DVD. One of the great little memes that, of course, came out of the whole Snyder Cut thing, is people writing, release the Snyder Cut of Aquaman, release the Snyder Cut, which was pretty funny. Clever Swear also follows up with, how much do you want to bet Joseph Levitt made his directorial debut film, Don John, about porn addiction only to constantly make out with Scarlett Johansson? Well, no, I can tell you for a fact that's not true. One of the great things about that, and I'm glad you brought up that film, Don John is a really solid film that Joseph Gordon-Levitt directed. And I had the privilege of actually having him, number one, he came into my studio so I could sit down and do a one-on-one with him about the movie. And then he and I got up and we walked into the theater where we were holding, AMC was holding a special advanced screening of the film. And I got to go into there with him and then do a Q&A with him about the film after we did our one-on-one interview, which was a lot of fun. And he was so nice and so accommodating. Honestly, he couldn't have been nicer. I really liked the film, Don John. Clever to Swear writes, Thank you for today's show, John. Abbreviations are fine. I'm always asking people, please don't write in abbreviations because you run the risk of me not knowing what it is you're talking about. And then Clever to Swear follows up with, forget treadmill, I'll super chat $5,000 if you do your next companion video while bench pressing maybe up to 400 pounds and continuous reps until the end. I'll tell you what, I used to do a lot of weight training. I have never in my life benched 400 pounds. So never in my best day could I bench 400 pounds. So, yeah, your super chat money is probably safe on that end. Clever to Swear. All right. Dirk Walker writes, do fake deaths in Supernatural bother you as much as the ones in the MCU? I think Supernatural is far more guilty. People have asked this question before, and no, not nearly as much. And there's two very important reasons why. Okay. There's two very important reasons why. Number one, in Supernatural, you are literally dealing with God, heaven, hell, death, afterlife. These are all like core themes in Supernatural. Right? So I expect a little bit more like somebody's gone down to the pit and then brought back. Okay, there's a little bit more that fits more narratively. But more importantly, and this is the big point, this is why fake deaths in Supernatural don't bother me as much as fake deaths in, say, the MCU. And that is this. There have been 23 MCU movies with probably a 1-to-2 ratio. Like for every 2 movies, there's at least one fake death. Actually, it's probably more like a 2-to-1. It's really more like for every two fake deaths to one movie. With Supernatural, there have been over 300 episodes of Supernatural. The fake death to episode ratio is infinitely smaller than the fake death to episode ratio in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Infinitely smaller. Like one fake death every season. One fake death every 10 episodes. Something along those lines. But the other thing is this, is that even Supernatural, a couple of years ago, recognized that the fake death stuff, even though they did it infinitely less in a ratio basis than, say, that the MCU did, they recognized that's still a problem. And so what they did was they built into the show a couple of years ago that Death herself came to Sam and Dean and said, hey, you guys have each been bailed out once or twice. No more. Death said to them, just to put a finer point on it, the next time you guys die, you're staying dead. Like Death came to them and said, the next time either one of you die, you're staying dead. Because even though Supernatural had a much smaller ratio of it and it was done over the course of 14 seasons and all this kind of stuff, even they recognized if we keep doing this, it's taking away from a sense of the stakes. Because I think Dean had died and come back to life over the 14 seasons 2 or 3 times. So if you leave that out there, then whenever you have a scene of Dean might die here, you're as an audience member will start thinking, well, it doesn't really matter if he dies here because God will either just bring him back or one of the angels will just bring him back or something else will bring him back, right? So it was important for them to throw in this new narrative hook of Death coming to them and saying, hey, you guys have gotten out before, but I'm just here to let you know, as Death, the next time you guys die, that's it. There's no coming back. Next time you die, you're dead. And because they recognize that's a problem. And it's a problem that goes in the MCU. So no, I would say if you look at it on a ratio basis, I think the MCU is far bigger of a problem. Supernatural, actually life, death, heaven, hell, God, the devil, these are all things that are part of their narrative. So it loosens it up a bit. But more importantly, even Supernatural recognize that it's a problem, and they addressed it by putting in a new narrative angle with death saying, no. Next time you die, you're dead. To make sure now that when the boys get in life-threatening situations, they better not die, because if they die, they are staying dead, which is not something we have in the MCU. So no, for all those reasons and more, in Supernatural, it's not nearly as bad as it is in the MCU, but it was still getting bad, and they addressed it. I would love to see the MCU address it, saying, hey, if somebody dies in the MCU now moving forward, they're dead. If Kevin Feige were to come out and say, hey, listen, next time a character dies in one of our movies, they're just staying dead, period. That's it moving forward. It would be a huge thing. It would be a huge thing. That's my thoughts at any rate. Dylan Trost writes, ending of Rise of Skywalker has leaked. Maybe. Again, we've seen this happen before with MCU movies, with Star Wars movies, whatever, where supposedly how it ends gets leaked and it turns out it was all bupkis. Sometimes it's true. But yeah, it's just going to be a battle now to keep from getting spoiled, if it's real. Rugo Kelvin writes, I can't wait for your rant with CW when CW jobs Conroy's Batman. Well, here's the thing. I'll be okay if they job Conroy's Batman, because it's supposed to be a 70-year-old Batman. I'm okay at that point if you're going to tell me a 70-year-old Bruce Wayne loses a fight to a younger somebody else, then I'm fine. What I would really go off the rails from is if they brought in an incarnation of Batman in his prime, in his 40s Batman. If they brought in his 40s Batman and had him job to somebody, I would lose my mind. I would completely I would lose all rational. I would be so furious. It would be incredible. All right. Mike Schwenk writes, been listening almost daily for about, well, let's just say you lasted longer than 6 girlfriends. Just saying thanks for the audio only. Gets me through runs and long drives home. Well, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for being around through 6 girlfriends. Maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. But for those of you wondering what Mike's talking about, our Patreon supporters get access. We provide audio only versions, podcast versions of the show. For our Patreon supporters. So thank you, Mike, for being around, and I'm glad we can be there with you on your runs and on your drives home. So thanks for being there, man. Mike also follows up and writes, also, you made me the first person my friends go to for movie news and the last person they want to talk to when they fell for clickbait articles on Facebook. And that is one of the things we try to address. That is one of the things we try to address on the show. So thank you, man, for being a part of the show, and thanks for being part of our film fan community, and thanks for being a supporter, man, and we appreciate it. And may you have a great long run and drive home today, and may your next girlfriend stick. Here's hope. Maybe we can break my my curse, and your next girlfriend can stick. All right. Slim Trav writes, thoughts on Tyrese shading Hobbs and Shaw opening weekend? Well, we talked about that opening the show. I just look. There's a reason I think. I just, if I'm the studio, I'm cutting bait. I'm just getting rid of this guy. He is nothing but a distraction and a destructive influence on our franchises. He has proven he cannot stop himself from doing this. And who's going to want to work with him? Who's going to want to work with him moving forward? Knowing that he can throw a temper tantrum and then get online and just like attack your studio, attack your film, attack your other stars, attack their coworkers, just attack them online and cause a big embarrassment. He has done it time and time and time again. And, I felt sorry for him before because he brought up his daughter and all this kind of his kid, and okay, fine. But then he's done this again. I don't care how far into shooting they are, Fast 9. I think you got to just get rid of him. You got too many other actors in there that are busting their asses to try to make the whole franchise successful. You got Vin Diesel, you got Ludacris, you got Michelle Rodriguez, you got all these people in there that are busting their asses and trying to make the whole thing work, and then you get this idiot coming out and saying what he's saying. I mean, it's just undermining everybody. And at some point, you just got to say, man, that the liability of having you here has now outweighed whatever benefit having you here has done. You're now a liability to what we're doing, and we got to let you go. And I think he's just hurting his future career as well. Because again, who's going to want to line up to work with him later on? It's just not a good situation. It's just not a good situation. All right. Cinema Survey writes, if I hear one more person say Rey is a Mary Sue, I'll get an ulcer. Please learn what a Mary Sue is. People, newsflash, Rey is not one. Yeah. Now look, I have no problem if people hate the Rey character or don't like any of the movies that Rey is in. That's fine. That's subjective. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But what I do reject is don't make up false reasons. Like the calling Rey a Mary Sue to me is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a Mary Sue is. Because if you watch that movie, she is not a Mary Sue. That doesn't mean you have to like her. And it doesn't mean she has to be a good character to you. Maybe she's a terrible character for you. And that's fine. But this whole thing of calling her a Mary Sue, there is only one true Mary Sue character in movies. And that's Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto. And I still love the movies. And I still love me Vin Diesel. But the Vin Diesel, the Dominic Toretto character is the one true Mary Sue in movies today. All right. Javier Riaz, 405 writes, have you seen Euphoria? It's on Netflix. No, I haven't seen it. Rob, I remember came in one day after watching the first episode, and he was a little disturbed by it. And he was just something about underage girls having sex with older men, you know. So I was never tempted to see it. I've actually heard dramatically it's pretty good, but I've never seen an episode yet myself, Javier. Clever to Swear writes, thumbnail makes Wanda look like Voldemort. So hot. Let me pull up the thumbnail for today's show just to see what it is we're talking about here. Oh, I guess there is. I guess Ray did give her a little bit of a Voldemort look, didn't he? There you go. All right. Let's see. Darth Wayne 97 writes, well, damn, didn't see the other one coming. Daniel Day-Lewis comes out of retirement to play Crab L. Can't wait to see the movie. Again, for those you know, I made up something. So I don't know. What if they did something different with Superman? I don't know. Superman is actually crab. Kryptonians are big giant crabs. And instead of Kal-El, his name's Crab-El. So anyway, Daniel Day-Lewis coming out of retirement to play that. Damn, I really do wish Daniel Day-Lewis would come out of retirement. He's the GOAT. Javier Rios 405 writes, today, the Shamhammer turns 49. What's your favorite movie of his? Oh, wow. Yeah, Shamhammer's turning 49. Man, you know, I'm tempted to say Sixth Sense. But honestly, I know the movie takes some crap because the ending of the film is not great. But I really like Signs. I think Signs might be my favorite movie of his. Again, the ending is a little questionable, yes. The very ending of the film is a bit questionable. But for the most part, I really do love Signs. I mean, look, I also love Sixth Sense, obviously. I love that. Unbreakable is great. But I'm going to go with Signs. I'm going to go with Signs on that. Pure Kush writes, maybe DC and Warner Brothers should sell properties off so there can be more diverse voices making comic book movies and the DCU doesn't get overcrowded. Well, no, see, there's a difference, I think, between the MCU and the DCEU. Number one, right now, we live in a world where all the DC characters already belong to DC. I don't think Marvel should be selling off their characters. What I kind of felt for a while, though, is since so many characters are already at other studios, X-Men characters, Deadpool characters, Fantastic Four characters, Spider-Man characters, all that kind of stuff, and DC still had this huge plethora of characters, I liked the scenario that created. We had multiple studios creating fantastic movies. You know, Fox has made some of the greatest comic book movies of all time. With Logan, X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men 2, Deadpool, all these types of things. Sony has still made the greatest Spider-Man movies ever. You know, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I think, is the best Spider-Man movie ever. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is the second best Spider-Man movie made ever. You know, and then there was the Fantastic Four. Let's not talk about that. But we had a situation where those characters were already at other places. And those studios were doing great things with those characters. And we had multiple cinematic universes instead of just overcrowding one. And I felt that with DC is a different story. DC, all their characters have always been under the same roof. They have a smaller pantheon that they've been using. They haven't been overcrowding their universe, and we weren't in a situation where we had other studios making great movies of their properties. If there were, I might feel like they should keep those. But I do really think the DC situation and the MCU situation is completely different ball of wax, completely different scenario. Murray Reich writes, Alamo Drafthouse is having a clowns-only screening for It 2 at various locations. The one at one only had at Austin. Interesting. The one at one only had at Austin. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that second part by Murray, but the idea of going to a movie theater and sitting down in a movie theater to watch It, where everybody else in the theater are all clowns, that could be one of the most freaky things ever. I would love to see that. I would dress up in clown makeup just so I could go and see that theater, because I think that's awesome. All right, Lone Wolf X6 writes, so knowing Black Lightning characters will pop up in Crisis, which characters do you think will? Well, I think Black Lightning himself will. And maybe one of his daughters. I don't know how many of them they're going to do, but I think they're going to be at least a couple of them, so we'll see there. All right, guys, listen. Well, I've wanted to get through a few more, but we've already gone over 2.5 hours, so we got to wrap it up today. So thank you, guys, for being here for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Love having you here. Special thanks to Robert Meyer Burnett, Aaron Cummings. By the way, if you see us getting into heated debate on camera, we love it. Like, seriously, like when we go off camera, then we're like horsing around, all that kind of stuff. We love getting it. So I know today's show, we were like, we got really into it, but that's what we love. Robert loves it. I love it. Aaron loves it. And we all have a great time doing it. And we hope you had a great time enjoying it as well, because it's great to have these issues come up where we can debate and discuss and still respect each other and say to each other, I think you're wrong. No, I think you're wrong. I mean, and get into it. And that's what we love. And hopefully you guys appreciated it all as well. All right, guys, don't forget the John Campea Show returns again tomorrow. Make sure you come back and join us. And for all you guys who we still have outstanding questions to do, everyone from Lone Wolf 86, Jacob Cameron, Justin Fayrison, J Meister 25, Anital D's, and all the way down. Do not worry, guys. I am going to do a companion video a little bit later this afternoon, and all the questions that you guys sent in today will get answered in a video today. Make sure you come back and join us for that later. All right, guys, that will do it for us for now. Thanks so much for being here. My name's John Campea, and until our next episode, bye-bye.